Good evening. I'd like to open the 14th meeting of fiscal year 2020 of the Milton Planning Board. I'm Cheryl Tagayas, the chair.
Andy Swenson, secretary.
Rich Beeline, member.
Julia Getman, clerk.
William Clark, planning director.
April Anderson, member.
Kathleen O'Donnell, member.
Okay. Our
That's
next,
my name anyway.
our next meeting dates are February 13th and February 27th. Before that, though, next week there are two meetings. One is a joint meeting with the Select Board and the Affordable Housing Trust on Monday, and that is to review the revised housing production plan. I think the hope is that there will be consideration of a vote to support it on Monday. So hopefully everyone will have a chance to review the draft that was circulated to us.
So I unfortunately already had plans to be out of the country before that was scheduled, so I just want to make note of that. I'm not missing it by choice.
Which meetings?
27th.
February? So,
Oh, January.
all right, I was going to say,
January,
I'm going to miss February 27th.
It's
So you'll-
Monday,
So
right?
Okay, you'll miss.
Monday nights. I'm
Okay.
talking about
Tonight's
the,
meeting is at 7?
Mondays at 7 at the COA. It's
Okay.
the housing production
Yep.
plan.
I will be at
Got
that
it.
one.
I read that. Okay.
very disappointed I can't go.
If you have any comments, if you get a chance to review it, I'm sure they'd be happy
There
to.
was some wording
What's
that
on
I
the
didn't
agenda for the
have a problem
27th?
with.
February?
I don't know if we have it yet,
Lot.
except that,
Probably going to be site plan approval for, a continued site plan approval for 919 Blue Hill Ave. And if the public hearing for the zoning articles needs extra time after the 13th, it would be on the 27th.
Okay.
Both of those will start on the 13th. Should they be continued, they'll be on the 27th.
Okay.
Can I just
Ned has a question.
oh, yes, Ned?
comment, the 919 Blue Hill Avenue, we're asking to start the public hearing on the site plan approval on the 13th. We'll have the hearing with the Board of Appeals starting on the 25th, so it's not likely that we would be ready to come back to this board until the 13th of March. So we will not, I don't think we'll be scheduling for the 27th.
The 13th is, depending upon how long the public hearings go on the zoning articles, that's been targeted for those for some time, so I can't promise a lot of time on the 13th.
For the 12th it would be, right?
I'm sorry?
The 13th of March is a Friday.
I'm sorry, you said the 13th
Oh, I'm
of...
sorry,
February?
whatever the
February?
12th, I guess.
Oh,
So,
you're talking about March?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
I was talking
okay,
about March.
I'm, got that.
But he's
okay.
still,
Although
he
I
is
think-
coming on the 13th of February, too.
yes, although if we don't get much accomplished on the 13th of February, we'd certainly want to come back on the 27th.
Right, okay. I just wanted to not set an unrealistic expectation, that's all.
I understand, thank you for that.
Okay. Okay, and Rich, you're not available
Just that one day
on the 27th.
of February.
Okay. Okay.
Should we pick a different day that week?
I mean, doesn't sound, I don't want to mess up everybody's
Okay.
schedule.
Okay, I mean, if it's this public hearing and you're going to just miss one meeting, you can watch that.
Yeah.
So that should be okay. And then on Wednesday is the second public meeting regarding the East Milton Square planning with our consultant Judy Barrett. And that's going to be held at the Milton Arts Center, 7 o'clock, Phil, right?
Yes.
And so,
Which I can
are we
walk.
supposed to go attend the 29th as well? I mean, are we supposed to, the planning board is too? Okay.
Bill, we're posted for both of those? I know we're,
Julia?
I don't think the Arts Center has been posted yet, but the others are posted.
all right, but you will post also
Yes.
for the Wednesday meeting, right?
Yes.
Okay, because we did have a recent meeting where we weren't posted, so that was on the town center planning. And I did want to also announce that there's a follow-up planning session for February 11th, and that's with the youth, and the Youth Task Force has organized that. And MAPC will facilitate that, but the focus is getting input from the youth. Did I miss up?
No, you're absolutely right. Middle school and high school,
Middle school and high school.
So where is that meeting? The senior center?
COA.
Will we have a posted meeting for that?
We can.
Do you want to go? Yes.
If we,
Well, luckily, there was only 2 of us at that last one, so.
I think it's worth posting, so that if we want to have comments or questions, and have any discussion
I
about that,
won't
we
be there. I have
can.
a meeting with my clients in Newburyport, so
Okay,
I won't be on the 11th.
okay.
No quorum.
So middle and high school students are invited?
I think they're running it, or
They are
the focus.
They are our target audience.
They're the target
Good, so I
audience.
can bring
yeah.
my kids.
Yes.
Perfect, we'll be there. Free outing,
Only if they talk.
only if they talk. You don't get food unless you talk
Well,
tonight.
the
But they
idea,
are giving them food too.
Ah,
They
It's a win-win.
They know that
they know they need
Take
food.
know
it
their
Yeah.
audience. They're targeting them with food.
The idea is that they had a lot of input into the youth center.
Yeah.
That's just opened. And Scott McKay spoke then, and he said that the youth are using outdoor space in this vicinity, and sort of proximity to the youth center was a question. So in that town center planning, it made sense to think about the youth and
Great.
let them have their opportunity to express their desires and concerns, what have you.
think
So
that's awesome.
it's great, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. So during the master plan work 5 years ago, there was always this idea about needing to have the youth be a part of it, and so I'm thrilled that they're taking an interest. Okay, so minutes, I think we have the December minutes and then the January 9th minutes, is that right?
I think we're up
There's
to,
December 17th and January 9th.
I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance to review those, but if everyone else has, then we can move forward with that.
yes, I'm fine with them.
Okay.
okay. I haven't seen the January 9th. I'll get them from you after.
They're in the Dropbox.
They're in the Dropbox. Okay, I'm sorry. I had a tiny amendment to the December 17th. It said at the end, Ms. Swenson said she supported an overlay. I checked my notes and I said, does not oppose an overlay. And then I wanted to change, it said, concerns about parking setbacks, affordable housing, size of overlays, site-specific zoning, and issues with existing zoning were addressed. I wanted to say were discussed. Anybody?
No objection.
No objections to
Nope.
that?
No.
Okay.
I do remember you saying that. You were not
Yes.
opposed.
Thank
And
you.
so,
Memory.
then, so it sounds like we should do a motion just on the December minutes and not the January, since our secretary hasn't reviewed them. So I'll take a motion.
I move to approve the December 17th, 2019 minutes as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. All right,
I
citizens,
wrote on them though. but I can give them
citizens
to you.
speak.
Okay.
Is there anyone here who would like to address the board on a matter that's not related to the Milton Village overlay zoning? Okay. So, seeing none, we're going to move to the old business, the Milton Village overlay discussion. And we have representatives from the Affordable Housing Trust here who are going to give us some suggestions and some recommendations. So if they'll please come forward. And as Melinda and Julie take their seats, I do want to thank them and both the Housing Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust for their work. And I want everyone to appreciate that they've spent a lot of time on this, put a lot of work into it, and I know that we all appreciate that. So thank you.
You're welcome. So I am Julie Kramer. I am the chairperson of the Affordable Housing Trust Committee.
Oh, and I'm Melinda Collins. I'm an Affordable Housing Trust trustee, and I'm also the chair of the Select Board's Housing Committee, and I'm the vice chair of the Select Board.
So we appreciate you allowing us to speak on the Milton overlay.
Excuse me 1 second. Bill, are you going to get the draft, the working draft up on the screen for us and go to the affordable housing section, please? you mind just waiting 1 minute, Julie? to
Oh, sure.
Get that up there? Okay, thank you. So that would be section 7. And then I think also there'll be discussion on section 4B, right? So I don't know if which section would you like to do first? Is there one?
It probably makes most sense to
7.
start with 7.
7, okay. Is that legible from you?
Yeah, I was going to say,
I can't read it from here. Here,
You know,
take
one of
that.
these old people now.
Yeah, I
I
forgot my glasses in the car. Oh, wait, no,
I
wait,
think-
I think I may have forgotten.
Okay, great.
I didn't bring my glasses.
I have mine.
Ooh, look at that. Much better, thank you.
So, last meeting, we discussed changes that had been suggested by Kathleen on this section, which is what we see in red, right? Kathleen, does
Yes.
that look familiar?
Yes.
Okay. And I think at that meeting, we said, after Kathleen explained the reasons behind them, that it made sense to us, right? So now, please, go ahead.
Sure. So when we brought this to our committee, we discussed number 1, first off, our recommendation to change the 10% of the total housing units to 12%. And the reason we felt this was important is because we haven't met our 10% goal for SHI.
Wait, they're on a different section.
Yes, I'm sorry, we need to go back to,
7, no.
No,
Oh,
you're on 7, you're on,
that's
to
our,
go
you know what,
back
we're
to-
working off the older
Are we working
version.
off an older one?
Yeah, but
But it
the
was up
first-
there, it said 10.
Yeah, the first
Yeah, I thought it
sentence
said
is
10.
7, yeah.
Okay, good,
Right there.
right.
In Milton Village,
10%,
it's
all right, top line.
10%. Yep.
Top line, my bad.
And the reason we
Yeah,
felt.
there it is, first line.
Yeah.
We're looking for a number, I think, rather than a word.
Right.
Right,
Yeah,
I know.
okay.
And the reason we felt this was important is, as I said, we haven't met our 10% goal yet for our number of affordable units, our SHI, subsidized housing inventory. And we've been working, as folks know, on the housing production plan. And there is, movement underfoot to try to increase the SHI, right? We're at 4.6.
4.99, which will be
4.99.
lower when the census is done.
Right. And so adding, requiring a 12% number here versus the 10%, just demonstrates the town's, work towards bettering that number. A 10% number is status quo. It doesn't help us grow that number in any, meaningful way. And we felt that 12% was something that demonstrated our work towards, bettering the SHI. As well as, it wasn't so high that it would discourage development. So we would like you to consider that number as a revision to number 7. I think it's still number 7, right?
Yes, it is. sorry.
And then we spoke a lot about the contribution language for the bonus, for the
So
density
now
bonus.
that's back to 4.
So now that's
Right.
back to 4.
So I have a question, oh, yeah, no, okay, right, so we go back to 4 for the bonus.
But other than that, that was the
Well,
only.
the only
change
other
in
thing,
7?
but I see that you've actually rectified something that I thought that you had talked about at your previous meeting, which was to make sure that they're eligible for inclusion on the SHI.
Right.
So I see that that's different than our version, so thank you.
And one of the things that we added at our last meeting also was this sentence about the affordable units being integrated with the rest of the development.
No,
and
they were
how-
there, I was there, it was just in the
In a
wrong
different
place.
place, yeah.
But I just want to make sure you saw that too, because that wasn't in the
some of
early
the, yeah.
version. Yeah.
It
And I
was-
see that it's crossed out insofar as reasonably possible has been crossed
Right,
out. So
right, which
I
was the
like that
thing that we
change.
had, we were
We were
concerned
also
about,
concerned
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So now we're back to 4B, the Affordable Housing Unit Incentive, right? So one of the things that we talked about at our last meeting, and I think would be interesting to see, when you read that, our intent is that the 10% is built on site, that there's no option in the baseline 10% to be a contribution. Is that the way you understand it from
That's
your
the
reading
way
of
I read it.
Yeah, okay,
And so I
okay,
would just say I'd like the 10 to be 12.
right.
And yes, that would be a baseline, so that would, there's no getting out of that. That's
So it says
required.
between 5 and 10, what do you recommend? 5 and 12, or?
So when we thought a lot about this, and we think, because we'd like the 12% to be in lieu of the 10, it would go from 17 to 20. So that.
Instead of 15 to 20.
Right, instead of 15 to 20.
For the inclusionary amount, you know.
That you're
to
getting the
increase
full
the
5%,
inclusionary
right?
amount,
So you're changing that from 15 to 17, and keeping the 20, the high end, in place.
Right, so then, then the eligibility for the bonus requires between 5 and 8% more.
Right.
So the language would be,
Than the
I'm paraphrasing, in
12%.
exchange for including additional affordable housing units to achieve an inclusionary amount between 17 and 20% of the total number of units. And then eligibility for the bonus requires between 5 and 8% more than the 12% baseline.
Correct.
Okay, so those would be the three changes in that, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then, so that all ties to the change from the 12, right? Okay. And then, so does anybody have questions on this particular aspect of the recommendation before we move on to a formula?
My question is just about feasibility.
So Julie, I know, ran numbers. And do you want to just give us what you found when you ran the numbers?
Sure. So by rounding up at a 0.5 rounding up at a 0.5 or lower, under a 0.5, the difference between 10 and 12 really isn't that great, right? It gets a little more obvious, or it gets a little more when you have larger projects, right? So between like the 10 and 12 range, the 10 and 20 range, it's not, they're almost the same, a 10% and a 12%. So that being said, on the larger units, on the larger projects, it starts to have an impact, and it should, because we're adding a lot of units, and we're actually, in some cases, it's one step forward and two steps back, because we're adding these bonus units that may or may not result in more affordable units. It may be a contribution, right? So, I feel that 12% is even more important because we're allowing this bonus, this contribution, to be used for historic preservation or public realm, which, given the location of this overlay, has significance. These are, the historic part of town. It's very much needs the public realm and public infrastructure work to support not just, more units, but to support the town in general. So that the 12% in our minds just felt even more important because the bonus was two steps back. If that bonus goes to historic and or the public realm, that's your guys' decision. But it will hurt the SHI.
Yeah.
It will affect the SHI.
That's actually very helpful. I was thinking about it as how would this impact feasibility of a smaller project, which I think is more likely what
More
we'll
likely.
see. But you're explanation makes perfect sense, so thank you.
So,
Don't
one
we
of the
still
things-
have to do 10% affordable?
Yes, still.
12.
12.
We hope.
Okay, we still have, yeah, we still have to do it, even if we do a
Yes.
bonus floor toward history or
Right,
toward something
right.
else.
One of the-
And
one of the things-
that's the whole point.
That's the whole point,
Is the
okay.
bonus, those units, if you decide to do the contribution, don't bring with them an affordable unit.
I see.
They
So
bring
that-
with them,
that
other
additional
important
floor.
things for the town, obviously, but and so that's the one step forward, 2 steps back.
Okay.
So this is something we hadn't discussed, but we had just started talking about rounding, and I don't know if it needs to be stated in the zoning that, if there's a partial
We do
unit.
have a rounding in here.
Oh, I missed that then.
I
Okay.
thought I read it somewhere in
Yeah.
here, but
All
I've
right, good.
been reading
All
so
right.
much recently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it,
Just to capture that.
right. One of the things that I'll point out also is that most of these sites are small.
Yeah.
We have a lot coverage requirement of no more than 60%, and the bonus is a floor. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you can have a 6,000 square foot footprint. So your bonus is a 6,000 square foot floor, but you also have to have setbacks and step backs depending upon what your neighbors are. So you're likely to have less than that 6,000 square feet. If you have a 900 square foot unit, you're not looking at a lot of units for the bonus. So, it's just the nature of the lots that are available in this district.
One thing I want to note, the Affordable Housing Trust is also working on inclusionary zoning. And so even something that seems as if it won't be necessarily applicable on some of the lots, or maybe many of them, depending upon what ends up getting developed, I think it has important implications to show that we do think that this is important, and to see that this is how it can work, so.
And I know Rich has been participant in the Housing Committee and a party to these conversations. So Rich, you've been supportive of this recommendation of 12%, right?
Yes.
Okay. So is there any more discussion on these percentages? Okay. And is everybody good with the recommon on the percentages?
Percentages are fine with me.
Okay.
I mean, as Julie's pointed out, you're always chasing your tail. Every time you add another, more
Right.
units, you got to be moving SHI. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so you've got those up here, Bill? Great, okay. And now one of the hard parts is the idea of coming up with a formula.
Right.
And the idea that this formula could also be a metric for the other 2 bonus incentives, right? So thanks for working on it.
Yep. So we did go round and round on this, and obviously our goal was to make sure that equal weight, if you were a developer, would be put towards either putting the unit on site or making the contribution, right? We didn't want this to be an easy decision for them. We wanted them to really think this through. So we were looking, we analyzed a lot of inclusionary housing proposals from a lot of nearby towns. We looked to Boston at one point, and where we sort of landed was to keep it simple, right? And so that a developer can easily ascertain what made sense for their development and how to make it work within their financing and their decisions, was to have one simple equation for both rental and homeownership. And many places differentiate the two for lots of reasons, because certainly in a place like Milton, housing prices are extremely high, and so you're looking at, an affordability gap and a production gap. You're really looking at both in our case. So we struggled with it, but I think we ended in a good place. We decided that the contribution should be defined as the total development cost, TDC, for those of you who know what TDC is, which includes, the building costs, the soft costs, the land costs, multiplied by the number of units in the project, the new bonus number of units in the project.
Right, not the baseline.
Not the baseline, so it's, if you could do 10, and you got a bonus to do an extra 5, you've got now 15. So 15 times the total development cost per unit. And we thought that that number obviously is a number of significance to developers and may not always include everything that we think it should include. So we thought about settling on a number that we felt best represented a TDC for a project in this area of Milton. And we turned to the QAP, the Qualified Allocation Plan, which is a plan developed by DHCD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, really as a roadmap for the allocation of their resources, their tax credits and their soft money for homeownership and rental housing. Primarily, it's used in the rental realm. And they do set TDC limits. And it is a number that's been vetted, that's been discussed, that's been, with contribution from developers, nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, CDCs. And it's a number that is broken down into Metro Boston, outside Metro Boston, small units, large units. It's very well defined in this, in the QAP, in the Qualified Allocation Plan. So it sets a number for a total development cost per unit. And we felt that that was a good metric to use. It's something that's readily available. It's been implemented in, statewide, and it's a number that, has been thoroughly thought out. So we thought that was a great proxy for this calculation, and, sets the right, the right level of contribution.
So while Bill's trying to pull that up, Julie, I did attend their meeting, which was before our meeting, and looked at this chart that's in this, and we were looking at, they have a category for Metro Boston and outside of Metro Boston, and then they have something also called Urban Metro Boston, which on their map, Milton is not necessarily, but I would argue that Milton Village, really, the construction costs are more like an urban condition, and which means that the dollar value allowed per unit is a little higher than it would be if it's in the non-urban category. Since this is something that we're setting in the zoning, we can make it the category what we think makes sense, right? Not necessarily whether it's officially in that category by their map. So that was something that they talked about at their meeting, and I just wanted to bring that up because I've talked with a couple of local developers about what they're seeing for construction costs. I've looked at it with work that my office is doing as well. And it seems that, and Julie's looked at it, and it seems we all kind of arrived at that same kind of on a dollar cost per unit. Kind of the variable, of course, is what the land cost could be driven up by something, but
So what is the number?
it's about just under 400,000 per unit.
Sounds about right. So what, and this would inform what the payment would be?
Yeah, so you take that number.
Yep.
Times by the number of units with the bonus. And then times that by at your discretion, either the 0.05, which is the 5%, or the 0.08. So within that, and I think it's up to, and this contribution could, would be great for it to go into affordable housing pot for us to develop some affordable units, but it could also be used on the historic or the public realm. And, it could be divvied up if you so choose for it to be, 33, 33, 33, or, and we imagine that if it's used for historic or public realm, that it might be part of the project in itself,
So may I just use an example? So if you had a 10-unit project and you got a bonus, and that became a 15-unit project, and you used 400,000 for easy math, times the 15 units, and then you did a multiplier, that's a $6 million project. You do a multiplier of the 0.3, you're looking at 180,000. If you did 6 million times 0.08, you'd be looking at 480,000. And I think, we talked before at prior meetings about having that range so that we can see just, if it's a little bit larger project versus a little bit smaller project, we can make that evaluation, because that's a fairly big difference in terms of dollar value between the two calculations. Yeah, so there it is, that's what I said.
Have you considered, I was looking also, doing some research on this kind of, this sort of calculations and other things, and have you considered, and I thought it might be not a bad idea, to say that we would only allow payments in lieu for home ownership condo projects, that not for rental?
So they would have to do the unit in
In the building, if it's a rental project. I mean, I think that's easier to do. Those are harder for an affordable housing trust to do.
They are, absolutely. I mean,
and-
all affordable housing is
Yeah, all
hard to do.
affordable,
but-
I know, all of it's hard to do,
yeah.
but I'm thinking that, given that area, that rental project, we would want to encourage affordable rental near transit, near the, that's in the village and all that sort of thing, and potentially wouldn't want to allow a developer to sort of write a check for the housing trust in lieu of providing where affordable units where we really need them. And so I was wondering whether that would be something that we might want to consider, to allow that payment only for a home ownership or condo units.
Obviously, we would support that. We would, think that's a great idea. I will say that, just based on my work with this payment in lieu or
Yeah.
contribution or whatever you want to call it, there are developers who would find that difficult to include even an extra unit in, their feasibility, right? And if you're giving an option to one, it feels to me like you'd want to give the option across the board. That's without my affordable housing developer hat on, right?
Yeah.
I also know that there is, some concern that if it becomes too, financially infeasible, that you're dealing with, a switch from rental to home ownership, right?
Right.
And we want both. We
Yeah.
need both. We see actually probably more a lack of affordable rentals
Oh,
in
absolutely,
this
yes.
town.
Yeah.
And so, I'd rather not convince a developer to go the home ownership route, because then he can make a payment versus,
Yes, we need rental properties, period.
So right. I mean, that's how I feel, but
I thought it was an interesting, in some of the examples that I looked at, that's what they had done, is that you couldn't do that. We couldn't do that, write a check idea.
right.
I'd be interested
For
to
the
know, if those communities really, what they really need, if they have the same profile we do as far as their mix of,
Probably
property
not.
type. So,
Then who's the landlord, or who's like the condo board, or that falls on the developer to set up before they leave the development?
Yeah.
yeah,
So
normally if you're
who's
developing.
overseeing, like, making sure it stays affordable and all that?
Well, everybody,
State
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
everybody
it's-
has to
it's
do
state-
that.
It's
Oversees
state
that.
restricted.
becomes
Yeah.
restricted, if, but in
Yeah.
both cases.
both cases.
Right.
Okay.
And then there's a monitoring, for rental projects, there's a yearly monitoring, that sort of thing. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's all set up as part of the restriction process. I know, this is it.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah, no, it's good to talk
I
about
have seen that,
everything.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I would hate to do anything to discourage rental in the town of Milton.
Yep.
And I think if we are, if that 10 could move to 12, I think we're making
Yeah,
strides
yeah.
towards the SHI, and I think that if you would consider, a third, and a third with the contribution, to me, that's another way of us getting to an affordable housing SHI number that's people
Right.
can
Well, wouldn't
build
we be saying that the fees in lieu of the units would be paid to the Affordable Housing Trust? That's not going into something else.
So what, remember that the zoning allows for an applicant to request a bonus based on one of these incentives, not multiple. So if they're choosing the affordable housing, then it goes into the affordable housing.
All of it.
However, all of it.
Yeah, that's right.
However, we also talked about, well, how do we make the other incentives financially comparable? So that we're not going to get all one thing, we don't get affordable housing, or they're getting a bonus for too little. I mean, there was always been that kind of discussion. Neighborhood was very interested in these funds being used in this district because that's where the additional square footage is being built. So we've talked about, there's two funds referenced in here. So we talked about tying that calculation to this one, right? So even though it wouldn't, they wouldn't always go into the Affordable Housing Trust, that fund, the calculation would be the same. So if we look at what we had put in a new paragraph 4D, it's a paragraph entitled District Improvement and Historic Preservation Benefit Calculation, but I think we could just make this incentive calculation and just, so it's just the incentive calculation. And then, Bill, are you doing that while we're speaking?
Which one do you want?
4D. 4D.
Oh, got it.
But I'd like to see us say that the affordable housing money is going to go to the Affordable Housing Trust. Then we don't need a separate article to create another account.
It already says it, I believe, doesn't it?
Well, it does, it's not very clear.
It's 4B,
B.
the last sentence, where it says, "and/or a contribution to the town's affordable housing trust."
Right. So it depends upon what the developer is applying the bonus, what reason the bonus is applied for. So are they applying for it under the historic? Are they applying for it under public realm? Are they applying for it under affordable housing?
So what we should add here is the amount of payment shall be in accordance with section 4D. It should go at the
Where?
end
Well, it
of.
says
Where
that
are you
up
putting
above
this?
on
Says that.
A.
Yeah, but that's only for district improvement.
Oh, I see that. Oh,
And then the historic has the same sentence, so this same sentence would need to be added to the affordable housing one. And then,
Yeah.
I see, yeah. Oh, but it was, okay,
I don't know if we'll look at it.
yeah. Okay.
sorry,
Where's the sentence?
There's, payment needs to be separated.
all right, so you caught up?
Based.
Caught up, Bill?
Payment is, there's a little red line and.
I'm not sure where we're going.
No, but
Yeah, so the amount of payment shall be in accordance with section 4D. Then we go to section 4D, and we're going to now change this to be incentive calculation, because it's for all of these incentives, not just two of them, right?
Yeah.
And then
To change the name to,
incentive calculation,
Yeah.
or you could say bonus incentive calculation, I guess.
Whatever you're calling them, yeah.
Bonus incentive calculation. And while you're doing that, right now, what's underneath it says, the value of the proposed dollar contribution must be equal to or greater than what the dollar value would be if the payment were based on the affordable housing unit incentive. The affordable housing unit incentive dollar value, now here we said shall be determined, we're going to change that. And we're going to make this suggested formula. So, shall be determined by formula as such, or something like that.
For the following formula.
The following formula. total development cost as defined by, and what's the official name of the,
By qualified, was it? what-
Allocation plan?
Yeah,
do we need to say the DHCD?
we will put that
I
in
would,
just a second.
Or the Massachusetts.
Allocation.
Massachusetts, yes, so.
Massachusetts, just Massachusetts?
I think it's called Massachusetts,
Well,
right?
let me go.
I don't have it.
Can you give me the value shall be,
Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Department of Housing and Community Development.
Oh, so- But if we just said qualified application plan established by DHCD, which we've already
could say
defined
that.
in there?
Qualified allocation plan established by DHCD.
Yeah.
I think you can say that, that's,
so I'm missing something in this first sentence.
Yep, total
Right.
development
Determined by the
costs.
following formula.
You
Total
need, you
development
need to put a colon
Say,
Right,
after formula, and then drop it down, and then say total development costs as defined
or total development cost per unit.
per unit,
Unit.
per unit,
And per unit type.
unit type,
per unit and per unit
Yes,
type.
per unit.
Per unit,
and unit
and per
type.
unit
And
type.
per
yeah.
unit, you need both.
Yep,
Per
Both.
unit and
and
unit
unit type.
type.
You could even say just per unit, comma, per unit, or per unit type.
That
Oh,
works.
there you go.
And unit type,
have type.
established by DHCD, by qualified,
Defined by
That's
or
defined.
established by?
You can say
yeah,
defined in the qualified allocation plan.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say current,
Yep, current.
in the then current.
the then
In the
current,
then
right.
current, right, good.
Qualified.
And you can say issued or established by
Yeah.
DHCD.
Established by DHCD,
We have to call it QAPT.
yeah.
Then it would be times the number of units.
Yep,
Need
times,
somehow?
I would say the number of units, including the bonus units, right?
Multiplied by the total number of units.
Yes.
Multiplied by the total number of units, okay.
And then multiplied by the bonus factor,
Yeah.
which is either .05 or
It actually be, it could be in a range, right?
yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So I think just the fact,
And
the bonus
multiplied
factor.
by the-
Bonus
factor.
factor, exactly.
Then multiplied by the,
Bonus factor.
Bonus factor.
And this was simple. This was the simplest way.
I know, I was making, my
You
head
should've
was
seen.
spinning when I was looking at all the different ones.
Yeah, I started thinking about cap rates and I thought, nope,
Yeah.
can't go there.
is the bonus factor the .05 to .08?
Exactly, yeah.
Should we further define that? Should we say,
.05?
should we say
No,
something
because
further?
it's
Or should we
range.
give an
0.08,
example?
right?
or anything?
17
No.
or
20.
Right.
And then you ought to just add, I think,
Okay,
that
wait a minute, what, I missed the
the,
last thing you said.
the planning board can determine these fees annually without a public meeting, so, I don't know. Whether you want to do a review of this every year or not.
Well, I think you put by the
Yeah.
then current,
Yeah.
Right,
you covered.
right.
Okay.
The other thing that we wanted to mention that you don't have is a reference to a payment schedule. And while we don't suggest you put a payment schedule in your zoning, making a reference to it, that it's going to be part of the permit process, with the contribution to be satisfied by no later than the certificate of occupancy, we think that's kind of important.
That's
just
a good
to-
idea. That's
just
a-
to
Where
put
should
it
that go?
somewhere.
Do you
Just
think-
say, right at the end, after the bonus factor,
Okay,
then you just get all, just say the bonus incentives must be paid.
I think it's I think you define it as
Contribution,
contributions?
yes,
Yeah.
the contribution.
so,
Contribution
yeah.
must be, yeah.
so bonus contribution?
Well, no, we called it dollar contribution up in the first sentence.
Okay.
So it should just be the dollar contribution instead of bonus, just
Okay.
the dollar contribution shall be paid not later than the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. Don't you think that makes sense?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to say final issuance, if they're condo units, you might have different C of Os.
I think, I don't know, I just, maybe they should, do you need to
I'm not
to
so
have the
sure I want to say
flexibility?
the final, we could say
Yeah,
that in the
okay.
permit.
Right,
Yep,
because it
yep.
may be a stepped thing, like
Yeah.
I'm
The
thinking of
phasing
Milton
thing,
Woods
yeah, right.
and Walcott,
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
a stepped approach, and I think we want to give them the
agree.
flexibility to do
In a
that.
special permit.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That work?
Yeah, we just need
Yeah.
to spell
we
out
want
things
them-
like qualified,
Yeah.
yeah, you need to spell that out, because.
Do we want it to read this way? Because it sounds like they get the issuance,
Say that it's the qualified application.
certificate,
That's all.
and then they make the payment. Don't you want to say they can't get their certificate of occupancy until they make the payment?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because that's the only, so you see how it's
So
worded?
can you
a
just
little-
say,
I
shall
think-
be
Let
shall be
Bill
paid
get
prior to
qualified.
the
Yeah.
issuance?
Get him
I just want to make sure we keep the
allocation.
hook.
that's actually what
They
we
don't get-
mean, so
Yeah,
yes.
that's what we meant.
Thank you.
So let's just, all right, so we're letting Bill get caught up.
And what, didn't we write, like, no later?
No
than?
later than, but,
Yeah.
but,
So prior to the issuance
Must be
would be.
paid
yes,
prior
prior
to
to,
the issuance.
that's
Yeah.
much clearer.
Yeah.
So dollar contribution must be paid or shall
Prior.
be paid?
Shall be paid
Okay,
prior
to the
to the
issuance.
issuance.
Yeah.
There we go.
Shall be paid
Prior
Prior
to.
to, and then no later than can be erased.
We probably should say of a certificate of occupancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's that?
Do we need to spell it?
Of
Do we need to write out what
A
DHCD is?
certificate.
No, because we
Already did it
defined
up
it
above.
earlier up.
You
up
did,
above.
okay, I didn't remember that, great. And see, up
payment
above
later.
payment
Yeah.
Yeah.
is running together with is.
Paymentus.
Tough to do
Sounds
this,
very
so.
Latin.
No, yes, no.
It's tough to do this.
Actually, we defined it in number 7.
I couldn't
Yeah, we
Or
defined
your
DHCD in number
keyboard.
7.
I couldn't do it.
Gonna watch it there to get the keyboard.
Yeah, right. So we should
To move it, yeah.
Yeah, we need to put Department of Housing and Community Development
Yeah.
here because it's defined in number 7.
Okay. So, did you hear that? You need to put Department of here,
Housing.
because it's only defined
Oh,
further
it's
down.
only, okay,
Find a
it
number
is, yeah,
7.
so it does need to go there.
Do you want me to tell you, it says, yeah, housing and community development.
And then we'll take out the, in paragraph 7.
7.
We'll just leave DHCD and take out.
Right.
Do we leave Massachusetts in though?
No, we don't need to do
Okay.
that.
Do we put Massachusetts in 4?
We should take Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Put Massachusetts in 4?
Before department,
Yeah.
By the Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
In case there's some other one, random one, like in Missouri
There
or
is
something like
actually
that.
many other DHCDs, believe it or not.
We're going to use the one from Kansas.
Wouldn't that be convenient? It'd be like,
That must be what they meant.
Yeah, exactly.
I bet you
Absolutely.
zero contribution.
Because we're concerned about urban blight.
So Bill, before our Affordable Housing Trust members leave, did Building Commissioner have any comments on this section? I know we have some, we haven't gone through all of his comments. Do you have his comments with you?
He didn't have on these.
This one's yours. This one's mine. Sorry.
So while Bill's looking for them, I just want to make a note to the two of you. I can't make the meeting on the 27th because I scheduled some travel arrangements, but I don't want you to take that as an indication of my level of interest because I'm very, very interested in the work that you're doing. I appreciate it very much. Looking forward to getting involved, and I'm sorry I can't be there.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'll be
You'll
out
be
of the country.
missed.
So
but
while we're-
your travel will go
Well, and
well.
while we're waiting for this too, maybe you could comment on the references in the housing production plan to the potential of this zoning for housing. I mean, I know it's referenced in the plan. I don't know if you have it in the top of your head.
I
but-
don't have it. I don't have it at the top of mind, except that we thought it was extremely important to include it in the plan, not only so that the town pays attention to Milton Village and notes that it's a particular and unique in Milton smart growth opportunity. That's what, those are two reasons that it was mentioned.
My recollection, and correct me if your recollection is different, that it provides an opportunity for a different type of housing type, whereas the majority of the housing type in Milton is single family, that an overlay, this overlay could provide for a different kind of unit.
Yeah.
That would hit a different
Multifamily,
demographic.
Right,
you know,
and
it's an area of, where density can be, taken on and,
Yeah.
with access to the, T and walkable and, close to amenities. So-
This district, it has walkability to a grocery store, at least one pharmacy, coffee shops, cafes,
Right.
restaurants,
And
a gym, other
restaurants.
post office. I'm trying to think of all the things that are within
Well-
walking distance. It's a lot.
Yep.
Two
Hardware store.
Right.
Hardware store, yes.
In addition to families needing housing, the two demographics that really, really need affordable housing in Milton, and even just smaller housing, are elderly, because our elder population is projected to grow to, I feel like 34% or 34% over the next 10 years. Anyway, I'm sorry, I should have brought the plan with me, and I don't have a head that keeps all those figures. But I know that that's a large issue in Milton, and I have people come up to me all the time who are older or have children who would like to come and establish before they have families, that they need smaller units. When older people are able to stay in their communities and do so and retain their assets, I mean, that's really powerful, because our communities stay healthier, those individuals stay healthier, and then there's a home for a family to move into, and maybe a family to move up into. We see, I think a lot of times in East Milton Square, people are going to the ZBA for all these special permits to expand their homes, because there isn't a home to move into as their families expand. And that has taken away starter home housing, which now we don't have. So a separate issue, but we could have younger professionals moving in there, and we need them. They would, they're part of any vibrant community, and we need our elders to be able to downsize and live in a mixed age community, because they are a different part of the vibrant community. So.
Something interesting that I learned when doing some of the research in preparing for the September presentation, with the pass off for the Master Plan Implementation Committee to this board on the zoning, was I called the owners of the Milton Hill House, and they have two major structures there that are rental, and they told me two different demographics. So their older building is basically people who had downsized at least 10 years ago in Milton, but that their newer building, which is right on Elliott, has more young professionals who want to have access to the public transit and the amenities. So it's really hitting, both, I think those demographics that you just said, is what they found their demand is. So. Bill, sorry.
No, the only one I remember was the setbacks.
Okay.
Remember, he wanted,
He had another one that I have here too, but okay, so nothing else on the phone. Yes, April?
Can I just ask a general question? Is there anything in the zoning that would preclude us from adopting 40R as well in this district?
I think the only issue you might have with 40R would be getting the state to approve it, because it's already an overlay district that sort of achieves that same thing. And since you get a bonus, you get a check, it'd be hard to sort of establish whether or not the 40R would allow an increased density. So you might not get any
Over what
money
you
for
have
doing it.
already.
Yeah, I think that would be, don't you think that might be the?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But we could still do it, recognizing
Yeah.
you don't get that first, zoning
Right.
payment, but the production payment, we could still get.
Yeah, and
Right?
the school costs.
Yeah,
The school costs.
40 is.
So, yeah, but you wouldn't get you might not get as much of a check in the initial, because there wouldn't be that much of an uptick.
Well, depending on how this goes,
Yeah,
we should
Yeah.
think about that in the future.
yeah, no, it'd be good. It's certainly a smart growth location,
Yeah,
as
cer-
opposed to
yeah.
a lot of the other ones we get told are smart growth locations.
And one other thing
Oh,
I wanted to ask you about, especially, Julie, I know your work is in the affordable housing world. In doing research on parking, I've come across a lot of data that says that parking requirements are one of the things that actually are causing affordability issues, because it's expensive to build and it gets built right into the cost of the rent or into cost of the sale price, even if the lower income person is not having the number of cars. They still are basically helping to subsidize the market rate units. And I'm just curious if that's something that you understand to be the case, because I've read it in several different places now.
Yeah, I mean, in any location, where you're building multifamily housing, parking is, the hot button, right? And making sure there's enough, but also, developer not wanting to build parking that goes unused. Especially in locations like the Milton Village, where there's topography and, sometimes you can sneak some, parking in without having to really take on the cost of a podium or, other underground features. But at least with the tax credits the world that I live in, if you include those costs in your basis for your tax credits, you can't charge for parking. So that's just how that dynamic goes. So you will, in some cases, carve out the cost of that parking so that you can charge for it or offer it to not just your residents, but other residents, other neighbors. But, I would say there is definitely a shift towards less parking. It used to be 1 unit per bedroom. And that's antiquated. It's not like that anymore. Where we sort of see it working is a half a parking space per unit. And that's really, we have not found that to be, too few. We've sort of felt like that's the right spot for it, especially in a neighborhood like this where you've got access to, transportation and, your grocery store's close and, everything you need to do is close. So it's very costly. Parking is very costly. Structured parking.
Right,
especially.
structured parking, I think it can range from 25,000 to 50,000 a space, right? And so if you're selling a unit, an affordable unit at 200,000 or 220,000, if you think it cost you 400,000 to build it, and then another 50,000 or 100,000 for the parking spaces associated with the unit, that just drives the cost up that much more for the non-subsidized units, right?
Absolutely.
All right, well, is there anything else you'd like to provide feedback on?
No?
Well, thank you so much for all of your work on
Thank you for letting
this.
us contribute.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you for inviting us to contribute.
Thanks for all of your work.
We'll see you soon.
See you Monday.
So I mentioned Joe Prondak, our building commissioner, having provided some feedback to Bill. One had to do with setbacks. One had to do, I know, with the reference to business parking, where it says in the event of a restaurant use without a bar area. But Bill, you don't have those markups with you, so.
No, I just have, he didn't have an answer, he just had it highlighted.
mark.
He said, what about this?
All right, so let's start with what he said about setbacks. So right now, this zoning matches the underlying business zoning, which is that it's 6 feet for the side and 12 feet for the rear, unless you're building to the lot line, so you can't have like 2 feet. You can't have 3 feet. If you can have 0, or if you don't have 0, then you have to have 6 on the side, and the same thing on the rear. And his suggestion was what, Bill? To eliminate those
To
setbacks
eliminate it altogether and go with 0.
Having been at least 40 meetings with the Master Plan Implementation Committee and the community, would not support that change, because there was a lot of concern about the adjacent properties. We did a lot of work, did a lot of design standards to protect those boundaries, and so I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
No, I think that's right. I mean, Denny, I think would agree that that's what we've kind of heard, and I think that if we said 0, that people would be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if anything, I would love to see more open space than less open space. I mean, I would love to see an incentive for that, but.
Well,
I
remember, the
wouldn't-
lot coverage is 60%. That
yeah.
means 40% is not. You're not allowed to have building on 40% of your lot. So, and in many business districts,
It's
well, there's
zero, yeah.
not, right now, the underlying commercial doesn't have that. It's nothing.
Right.
So it's just those setbacks
Yep.
and whatever you get. And when I looked at a few of them for the MPIC, definitely you would be allowed a bigger footprint. Maybe you wouldn't go as tall. It kind of
Yeah.
depends. But if you did structured parking in a couple levels, you would end up with a bigger volume than this zoning does.
Yeah.
Then, all right, so the other comment of his related to, you have number 8 up there, Bill? Okay, so where it says, in the event of a restaurant use without a bar area. Well, I guess he questioned whether there is such a thing. I mean, I guess there are if they're only open for breakfast and
Or
lunch. but
Tino's or something, like a pizza
Yeah,
place.
or takeout kind of thing, yeah.
Or the plate.
Yes, yeah. I guess thinking Steel and Rye and others, it's not, it's different, yeah, but you're right.
Sit-down,
Yes,
full-service
yeah.
restaurant would have a bar, but
Yeah,
there's plenty
right.
of them around in that area that don't.
So what's the, I guess his question is, well, what happens in the case of where there is a bar,
There is a-
right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Now, I did do some research into other restaurants in town.
Well,
and
then
asked
aren't
Bill
you
for
back to
same-
the, if there's a restaurant with a bar, aren't you back to 1 space per 1,000 square feet? Isn't that how that's going?
You count the bar seat, well, you can count it as a seat at the bar, so the length of the bar times the seat.
No. I thought
I'm
that-
sorry.
no,
Preceding
no.
sentence.
Oh, sorry, let me see.
So in
Parking
the
for
event of a
business.
restaurant use without a bar area, it's 1 parking space for each of the 4 patrons' seats in the restaurant. So I think Joe's comment is, well, what if you have a restaurant with a bar? What's the seating for that?
So my
Aren't you back to
suggestion
the
is,
1 space per 1,000 square feet?
no, my suggestion was it would be based on the seating at the bar. Because, I mean, otherwise, if you're going to do it based on standing area of patrons in the bar,
Well, I guess, I'm just having a hard time when I read this, and I've read it a couple of times, is that it seems to me that we haven't addressed the situation of a restaurant, with a bar
right?
at all.
Unless you just include that as a business use.
Unless it's, and then would default back to the business use, which is 1 space per 1,000 square feet of business floor area, which doesn't make any sense if it's a restaurant.
Bill, you sent me the Steel and Rye. I didn't have a chance to read it. How does Steel and Rye parking relate when they have the bar? I looked at the special permit for 88 Wharf and 2 Adams with respect to requirements for the restaurants. all of these are in the district? Or-
I would say go by the number of seats, except that at bars, people do tend to stand.
Yeah.
So you have more people than you have seats.
I did a bunch of research on this for a study that I did, I think in
Yeah.
Randolph, but I can't recall.
As I said, I'm just thinking that it doesn't, we haven't really talked about, it doesn't, whether this all reads, we haven't said what we want when it's actually a restaurant with a
We haven't thought
hop-in
of
bar
that.
serving whatever, you know.
You could be serving ice cream.
Which is
Well-
what we want.
In the 2 Adams special permit,
Yeah.
it says the restaurant shall provide 34 parking spaces. In imposing this requirement, the board notes the recommendation by the Milton Village Central Ave Revitalization Committee dated November 20th, 2007, for a space-to-seat ratio of 1:4. And it's silent on anything about,
Yeah.
a bar.
So then why aren't we just saying in the event of a restaurant use, it's 1 parking space for each 4
Yeah.
patron seats?
I think that's how other towns do it.
And then,
Because there are seats at the bar.
I have to find it here.
So why wouldn't you just take out without a bar area?
Okay.
Kind of feel like, why would we treat bar seating different than?
Only because people do stand
out
at bars, so you
Especially-
have more
Parentheses.
people.
Yeah, but take out the parentheses and just say if it's a restaurant use, you have to have 1
One per
parking
four.
space for every 4 seats.
Shouldn't be driving.
And shouldn't be driving. And considering the aging population, we have probably a lot of seats at the bar because people aren't going to be standing when they're.
And 88 Wharf was also
Wish I had that study handy.
1 space per 4.
Yeah. So
And the way those parking spaces got allocated changed a few times, or where they were located.
yeah.
Well, I'm very interested to hear from the public, so.
Okay, so those were I think the comments that we received from
Joe.
Joe.
and
And if
Affordable
there's
Housing Trust.
if there's anything else, Bill, you'll let us know.
Can I-
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, can I make one comment? Not to rehash the bar thing, but I wanted to, because this was what was rattling around in my head while you were talking. In the event, when you do have a bar and people are standing around a bar, it's usually nighttime when, I don't know about this area, but like in East Milton, some of those bars have more people. There's less cars parked there because all the other establishments are closed. You know what I'm saying? And so people aren't going to the doctor's
it's like
office
shared
because it's 9 o'clock at night.
So the shared parking kind of, or the street
Yeah,
parking.
so I mean, you'd have to, if you really wanted to do the research, you'd have to think about that too, because
Yeah.
you wouldn't need double the parking during the day for people to drink at noon, I would think.
Because they're not,
Right.
the hardware store is not open.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Right. Okay, and the real estate office wouldn't be open,
Yeah.
and the
Right.
post office isn't open. Okay,
Right.
good point.
Yeah.
All right, so to Denny's suggestion, is there anyone here who has questions or comments for the board relative to this overlay? Sure. Sure,
Yes,
yes,
please.
yeah. Please give us your name and address for the record.
Warp Sergeant, 25 Canton Ave, Milton. I am, so I live in the lane, which is directly behind the old DeWilf building, which is now the, whatever professional office building it is.
17 Canton Ave.
And actually, 3 of my neighbors are here, and Brian Bunn, who's the co-chair of the Milton Hill Neighborhood Association, is here. We actually had the opportunity to have the Swift Hat Shop presentation, which I think you had as well. And it's interesting, because at the meeting, we talked about what we could do in the area and how that side of the street, because of the height of the telephone building, lent itself to a little bit higher in that one particular site. And I think all of us that were at the meeting thought it was a really neat design. And we liked the fact that it wasn't a bulky building and that they tried to use clear glass and setbacks and all that. And interestingly, we talked about having a lower setback on the other side, or sorry, a lower height on the other side, consistent with the heights, the general height of the building slopes of the side of the street slopes slightly as you go up. So as you look at it, you start with the bank building. The buildings, actually historical photos show essentially a group of buildings that were brick that were the same height, where the Citizens Bank drive-through is. As you then go up a little bit, it starts to go up the hill a little bit, but the buildings start to get a little shorter. And as you get to the top of the hill, you have the funeral home, which is only 1.5 stories, because of the grade of the land goes up so high. So until today, I was prepared to tell you that we were looking to see if we could cap the height at the funeral home consistent with the grade of the land. So as you went up in grade, the buildings got shorter, so that you had a gentle slope down to the bottom of the hill, as opposed to a 4-story building at the top of the hill, which really was maybe 3.5, because the part of Adams Street, there's 6 or 7 feet, which is just a solid cement
Right.
slab, which is holding back the dirt because of the grade.
Right.
Interestingly, and that was actually supported by Ned Corcoran and Mike Roberts, who owns the Swift Hat Shop building and their development. Interestingly enough, though, today the Milton Times came out with the article, and this is just a printout, it's not the actual Milton Times, on the plans for, or at least one potential plan for the funeral home, which set the neighborhood abuzz, to say the least. And I haven't talked to the Historic Committee, but I know Meredith Paul is here, and I'm sure we'll have something to say. So, interestingly enough, I was going to argue that it really should be smaller, that there are lots of reasons for that. This is a big area. You could actually do a very nice 1.5 or even 2-story with some underground parking, and you'd still have all that there. What Chris Lydon, who's the owner of the building, is suggesting that its best use, I think, or at least one use, he's saying, is affordable housing with a 5-story building with 2 floors of garage, which I'm sure will set the neighborhood in tizzy, and reminds me of the Charlton Heston saying about taking his guns away out of my cold, dead hands. So, yeah.
I did I did go to the marketing site and looked at the drawings that are there, and
I haven't seen it.
it's built out to the property lines, the proposal, and it's, yeah. So I just want, for anyone who's interested, I can send Bill the link and you can take a look at it. But I did raise this issue at, I think, our last meeting, because I wanted people to be aware that that was out there. And I
hadn't
think,
heard of
I saw actually on LinkedIn, I was scrolling through LinkedIn, I said, whoa, what's that? And then found my way to it. So, but I think that might be some of where the Milton Times picked up on that. It was from our brief discussion about that. But continue.
Yeah, so, I mean, what I would do is, I would encourage Chris, and I was hoping he was going to be here. I know Chris, I'm sure Meredith knows Chris, he's a Realtor in town. I don't think it's the smartest thing for a Realtor in town to try and build a really ugly building that is the gateway to that part of Milton. But I would encourage him to do what every other development has done in the area, which is to come by. And frankly, I think Mike Roberts and Ned Corcoran did a good job there. They subtly suggest that, you know, this could be built as a monolith. We don't really want to do that, but here's some options, and we've really tried to sort of gear this towards you. And we know there's an extra floor here, but hear us out. Let's look at it, see if we can design something that meets your needs, and there are all these amenities, and maybe you'll consider it, given what it is. And Chris, as far as I know, hasn't reached out to anyone in the neighborhood.
Right.
And
Nor to us.
Nor to you, yeah. So good. So that was my other question, was if he reached out to you, I would have called him right away.
He did have a reference in that article, which I read right before our meeting, and I do think he should take a look at the zoning again in terms of what opportunity may arise. I mean, I did some analysis, but I didn't design a building, you know, so there may be some opportunity. But the analysis that I had done, which maybe you saw September presentation, I don't know if you still have this, Bill, but this blue here is that site. And in looking at it, I did get the topographic information from the engineering department. And so by the 45 feet as measured from the average grade, so on Adams Street, if you take that and you determine your number of floors there and you run that around because of the topographic change, by the time you're here on Canton Ave, you're less than 40 feet and you're 35 feet on high. So the topography is actually working to, bring the scale down as it rounds the corner. And then our design standards are such that that massing needs to be broken down, and we're very specific about not having uninterrupted planes. So like that's where the box is the uninterrupted plane. But the standards, which are not waivable, the planning board has discretion in terms of which standards, because you can't apply every single one of them. You'll have a hodgepodge of a building, right? So, but you're giving the applicant an opportunity to choose which of the standards helps break down the scale. But you cannot do nothing to break down the scale. So
Right.
I just wanted to point that out, because I know there's been expressed concern about this site. And this corner. But 35 feet is the height limit for all of our single-family residential districts. So it's in keeping with the heights. In fact, some of the single-family houses on Canton Ave are 3 stories, and probably taller than 35 feet. Our single families say 35 feet, but they also say 2.5 stories.
Right.
But if you look at some of them, because I've been down there a lot myself, some of them are actually 3 stories, and they probably go a little bit higher than 35.
Yeah, my personal opinion is that even if at 3 stories, you've got to think of a setback here, because
Yes.
it's so large
Yes.
that I don't see how you can have the 3 stories, even with the dormers that you show there breaking up the massing. It still doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense there.
You have to have not just the roof line, you have to have it in a plan view too. In other words, it's not just this and then at the top you change it. It's manipulating the shape of the building from the
Yeah, like the
ground.
Roberts Building.
Yeah.
He did a nice
Yeah.
job with that. There are a couple of setbacks there. There was the
Exactly.
setback, and then the glass, which looks much better than a brick facade or a flat facade. So we actually, I think the sense of the meeting that was a couple weeks ago, was people generally liked it. People debated whether or not it should be a bakery or something else at the hat shop, and whether the hat shop should be there, since its historical nature is in the sense of a historical building being there, not necessarily that building, and it can't be saved from what we understand, because it's rotting.
Yeah.
So, that's a detail, but if it works, if people like it, if they want to keep it in the neighborhood, they were happy to have it, which is great. I thought that was doing well. And it's unusual to me that usually, I know this is the Ice House, so usually somebody comes with a plan, says, this is what we'd like to do. The neighborhood or someone says no, and they say, okay, well, then I'm going to have to build a box, and it's going to be affordable housing. It's unusual to me, thank you. Yeah, so you have the step backs, you have the transition.
Right, so this is an example showing how the standards would apply on Adams Street, so that you could go this 45 feet, but it requires these, some combination. This is just an examul, it doesn't necessarily
There'll be
building.
people burning torches outside if it looks
And
like
that,
yeah.
This scale transition this way has to do with a smaller building being here. So these tie to the standards, to the word descriptions in the standards, because if people understand things better visually, in my world anyway. So if an architect who's working for an applicant sees, they'll get an idea. It doesn't have to be this exactly, they know that. But at least they have an idea of what helps break down the scale. And so this responds far more to the scale of High Street, whereas the other one is more responsive into the scale of Adams Street. And the topography allows us to do that, where these floors run through. It's actually, and then you can come in here and you can go down slightly to your parking, and then you can come in from the upper level, and you can manipulate burying that parking below your grade and in the back. And then our requirement is to have half of that floor space be commercial, so that it activates the street level. But these things were done through those 40 meetings where there was a lot of question about how is this scale going to work, and can we do more to ensure that what can happen there, and that's where we spend a lot of time on the design standards.
So,
And if this, just one last thing on the design, if town meeting passes this zoning, we are all committed to then taking the next step of having design guidelines, which go further than this. Didn't want to spend the funds, that it would take to do those until we see that there's support for it, through the town meeting. But that would take the design standards even further, where you can do more about how do you respond in in addition to an historic building, or things about materials, scale, etc.
yeah, I can tell you that at the Mike Roberts meeting, one of the neighbors who lives at 88 Wharf was absolutely beside herself that they might go beyond the proposed development or the standards, because they were concerned that so much time had been spent and so much effort and energy and input from the neighborhood that it was something different. And I think the factor that sort of weighed on us was somebody who's willing to put in a really nice design. We could think outside the box a little bit, and they were filing anyway before this would be passed, so it wouldn't really matter. And there was some accommodation to try and at least start with that and then go from there, which is what you hope for, as opposed to somebody coming and saying, I'm going to put a box up and it's going to be as tall as I can be.
Well, the idea is with having something which gives people an idea of what you'd like to see, is that then when a property does go maybe on the market or change hands, the people who are buying it have another opportunity versus the underlying zoning of the business, or then going to something really big, that we saw for 5 Canton, right? So this gives us something somewhere in between those as an option.
Right.
Somebody may still do something differently, but this at least sets, in terms of the way the state looks at these two, if we are passing zoning which is trying to achieve some affordable housing in a district, a transit-oriented district, that will be looked, we've heard from Kathleen in particular, favorably upon by the state when looking at a comprehensive permit, for example, right? And that's what we've been looking at with the Ice House, is the fact that we did pass zoning for that site, and we made it kind of clear what the town would support there. And so we're going right back and asking the state to to consider that, what we passed there and what we were looking for.
Well, so that's one of the other questions that this brings up, is that if a developer does say it's not economically feasible to build within that window on that particular lot, what I'm assuming that we do what everybody else does, is come back like Mike Roberts did and say, okay, so what can you do, and what can we do to make it as close as possible and make it nice and look nice? Does a developer have the right to go ahead and say, I'm just going to build affordable housing and it's a box and this is it?
That's the Chapter 40B, comprehensive permit.
It sort of depends upon where they are in the process. You can't, you're not, they changed the regulations, so you're not supposed to be doing that sort of threat situation. So if they've actually filed an application and then, they're sort of pulling it and going into 40B because they're cranky, that's a thing you can complain to Mass Housing about.
But the other question, though, in terms of the Mike Roberts and that site, if somebody came and said, my site has these challenges, just like he did, and this, they could still look to the zoning, but they would have to go to the Board of Appeal for variances then. And the question would be whether the, like the presentation to us on the Swift Hat, we also understood that it would exceed what we've been working on, but found that there were trade-offs there that were positive. And so somebody could do the same type of thing on another site, say, they would have to make the case, and, the community would have to weigh in, just as you were asked to, because the Board of Appeal will seek your opinion, and they'll seek the opinion of the planning board. So, sorry, one last thing on that. Then it was, in that case, it would take it out of this, probably this special permit kind of process, because their filing would be a different path, but we would still be coming to the planning board for site plan approval, I would think. So, but our hope is that this has been looked at by other developers too, and with these parking counts that are minimum requirements here, that they will make economic sense. But we've been told that if we increase the parking, then we're in a situation where they don't make economic sense anymore. So then we're looking at it not having opportunity for investment in the existing property owners.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the arguments that Ned Corcoran made in terms of the number of units. We could do this with 6 units, but it's not economically feasible, and it's too hard to park underground if we're going to do 6 units, so we really need to go to 8 or whatever it was, and that changes it a little bit, and we have to work with the design. I have no problem working with the design. I'm a little nervous about someone coming and saying, well, the site it's just going to be a big box, and it's going to be as high as we can, and we'll just start under 40B. I don't think that's in anybody's interest.
No.
Since there are restrictions on what a developer can earn in a 40B.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So,
It's limited dividend, yeah.
yeah, so I'm a little surprised, but I would encourage our planning director to think about reaching out to Mr. Lydon and telling him that the neighborhood would love to talk to him, and I'm sure you would as well.
Yeah, the 60 units with 67 parking spaces.
Yeah.
I'm a guest.
And
Oh, is that what it actually looks like?
And it's listed for $1.
This is bigger.
Looks like the
I
Mount
saw that.
Washington.
Bigger than the
Yeah,
Henry's
that's really-
building.
Yeah, I know, it is, isn't
Getting
it?
ready.
Yeah.
It's getting attention.
This is
yeah.
72 units if 88 Wharf has 73 units.
Then you had
I have
a
nothing.
comment or question?
Yeah, I thought your question was a good question, and I did want to point out, if you have a chance to read through the zoning overlay language, at the end of design standards, section 6, it says, "The planning board has the discretion to accept design exceptions to any design standard." So if you kind of read through closely, a lot of the things in here are guidelines for future planning boards. But to save money, a lot of these things could be negotiated away with a developer. So it's just,
Well, I'm not sure.
it's a good, I mean, I think it's good to have all of these things in here, but then I just want the public to understand that, you want to still be involved and keep an eye out and elect officials that you think are good on the planning board who will look out for your neighborhood, because, they might look at these standards differently from person to person, board to board.
Yeah, I mean, I think the planning board has always been good about neighborhood input over the years. I've been through 29 years, so I've been through 88 Wharf and many other, Hendry's 1, Hendry's 2.
Oh, my God. Well, if you've been through
that's
that, I think you're doing more than all of us.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's big.
It looks like the Mount Washington Hotel.
It
This
does,
is
doesn't it?
ridiculous.
That would be great on the side of a mountain. but
Yeah, right.
it's-
Yeah, this is
It's a little high there. That really is
bottom.
7 stories tall, isn't it? Yeah, I
It's
would-
60,
out to the Blue
69
Door
feet to the
Taqueria.
mid-roof.
Yeah.
That's bananas.
No
Come
way,
on.
that's awesome.
6 stories, yeah.
But this is a sales document.
No, this is,
So this is somebody hoping to coerce someone into
Mislead.
overpaying for this property.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, it says $1 for the price.
that's to get your attention.
Yeah.
all right.
Hit a dollar.
Do you have other?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
It works.
again, to the extent that Chris is interested, we would like to talk to him and see what he wants to do. And hopefully something can be done that's relatively close to your guidelines. So I I withdraw my motion to make it even shorter, since it sounds like that's not going to be feasible.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? Hi, Meredith.
Just in really following, which I agree with everything that was just said before me, so I'll be brief. But really, at what point, I think that the planning board can really create a vision for what this can be. You, Cheryl, have worked tirelessly to create a vision for conceptually size and scale, but I really think the community needs to embrace and envision what this area could be, meaning architecturally, what can we illustrate? And it doesn't have to be specific architectural drawings, but conceptually, often you'll see a community where you see suggestions of buildings, architecturally and design-wise, which really will set this area apart, because I think the potential for what this could be a gaslight district, that we have gas lights that come in a short area. We could do something really beautiful that people coming out of the city come into Milton and just have this sense of, wow, this is a really special location and area. Not telling a developer that they have to put gas lanterns on their buildings or doing something, but a suggestion of what this could be, of the charm and the character and the quaintness that this can have. So I think a lot of the properties that are in play that possibly will be developed are owned by local Milton families. And I think that will benefit us greatly, because I think they really do care about what the product, what they will be doing, the materials, and so forth. So I know you said the design standards, so I guess that's a question. When will at what time, if this is passed, are the design standards implemented? Are they implemented before people would actually put in an application for
I
a
would say we
project?
would start working on them right after town meeting.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I did see that Dedham's,
Norwood.
well, just on the Dedham one for the moment, their overlay district, they I saw on their website that their design guidelines, which were complete in 2017, they spent $20,000 on. So we did put in for a budget request
Yeah.
for the planning board of $50,000. I was asked by the town administrator what we might target that for, and it was between meetings. So I said, well, the board has discussed design standards. And I said, if the zoning passed, I could foresee us wanting to allocate $25,000 potentially to design standards for this district. And the balance would probably go towards further work in East Milton. But we see like some of this effort that has gone into Milton Village is having applicability to East Milton too, like lessons learned kinds of things.
It takes 4 to 6-ish months between town meeting approval and actually getting the approval from the Attorney General's office and everything else that has to happen. So we would have time before anybody was able to
Great.
even
That's
submit an
what I
application.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we've expended all of this fiscal year's monies as of recently. When last meeting, we just voted to use the rest for East Milton continued work. But the fiscal year ends at the end of June. So if our budget request goes through town meeting in May, then we would have, the funds as of July.
And depending on who we hire, they might take payment.
And we
in
may
July.
receive a grant, Allison worked on a grant. That one wasn't for design standards, but we continue to look for opportunities that way. MAPC, as April has reminded us a number of times.
We pay them
We pay
anyways.
them anyway, so if we pass it, one of the things about the grants with them is they've already granted us some for the village, and we haven't passed the zoning yet. So I've been told that if we pass the zoning, then that is favorable for us for another round of grant, right? Because we're advancing the work that they've already helped us with.
Yeah.
So it's just, but I just wanted to make you aware of the sort of source. We do have to kind of be mindful of the source of funds to do it, because it's time.
Absolutely. But I think we have to just be out ahead of
Yes.
development, because I think developers really want to know what the town wants and what the planning board wants. And it's much easier for them if they have sort of a conceptual idea or a vision of what we want, and we can say, this is what we would like this to look like, and they'll put their architects and say, okay, this is what, this is the direction that, something that will, work with, classic architecture that will be timeless. I think we have a real chance to recreate this area and not repeat mistakes of the past that obviously are buildings we would like to see demolished at this point. So that we can really create a timeless area that's a really special location and really enhances the Milton community. And I think if we can get out in front of them on a lot of these issues, when, just for example, topography, there's going to be a lot of retaining walls in this area. If we can get out in front and say, you know what, you need to put real stone because this is a historic area rather than cinder block walls. We don't want a village of cinder block walls. Items like that we can just get out in front. And so that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Totally agree.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay,
I was
great.
curious, Meredith, have you been having any progress on historic district?
We have been working, Chris, we have not, because of the holidays, we really haven't had a chance. We will be revisiting that, so we've had a lot of things on our agendas too. So, but that is something that we're still wanting
That
to
would
move
be
forward.
great to have, it would be really wonderful to have both the overlay and the historic district, so.
Right.
You know,
Or the architectural preservation
Right.
district, which is even, which we can sort of customize and make it what Milton wants it to be. So
that'd be great.
Yeah, that's great, and thank you for, but we're still, local historic districts is on the long-term table, I think, so thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Hello, Mr. Whiteside?
Hello, Alex.
Alex, thank you for your detailed comments that you continue to send us.
Yes.
I do continue to send. Alexander Whiteside, I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 9. Okay. The lot size is 3,500 square feet. And Mike Roberts says, you can't make the zoning work on my 4,000 square foot lot, and therefore I can't use the zoning. But the zoning stays at 3,500 square feet, even though Mike says that he can't use it, and he's the only person presumably who would use it. It maybe could be used on High Street, but is that what you want? Seems to me 3,500 square feet, which was designed for Mike Roberts, now that he says he can't use it, you should give some thought about increasing the minimum lot size. You say that 50% of the net ground floor must be used for business use. A couple of things. What is the net ground floor? You might define that if you use the term. The next thing is, what is the ground floor? At times, you use ground floor in this zoning. At other times, you use first floor, and both floors are supposed to have a 12-foot clear amount of floor-to-ceiling height. And if you want both the ground floor and the first floor to have 12 feet, fine. But
So,
what
Alex,
is the ground floor? What is the first floor? You've got to define that. And you mentioned that your first floor can be 4 feet above the pavement, the ground, and that's a basement. So would such a building have a ground floor?
so are there specific references that you can point us to in the zoning?
I could, but, I've got a lot to go through, and
right, keep going.
in other words, I'd just like to make my comments, and it's there. It's in the zoning, and it needs to be changed. Now, you have zoning that says 3 stories on High Street, 3 stories on Adams Street unless you have a 4th story. And then you have these incentives that you say can be used to give you a 4th story. Why not just say you can have 4 stories on Adams Street? Strike the incentives. Just say you can have up to 4 stories if you produce a good building. That's what you should say. This idea of charging someone $400,000 so that they can add an extra floor is not going to persuade anyone to add an extra floor. All it's going to do is cause them to go and do a comprehensive permit, because you can't charge money like that to people to add a floor, especially when, you know, there is no real pushback against a fourth floor except at the top on 5 Canton Avenue and the DeWolf Building. And the DeWolf Building doesn't have it would be 3 stories. It wouldn't qualify for a fourth story. But it is a gateway lot, and some care should be taken to try to make whatever is built, if DeWolf gets redeveloped, to make it smaller, not to max it out under the zoning. Same is true with 5 Canton Avenue. We really want to provide for a transition from the business district. But think about just making it as straight 4 stories on Adams Street, because these incentives are a lot more effort than they're worth. And so that's my view on that. Now, the historic preservation incentive says in order to use this incentive, you have to use the Secretary of Interior's design guidelines. And this is for when you add the 4th story, you have to add the Secretary's guidelines, even though the Secretary, I don't think, addresses adding stories to historic structures, because when you add a story to a historic structure, you're not going to end up with a historic structure. In any event, the Secretary of Interior's standards should be used in the straight affordable housing piece, in the affordable housing piece that's currently on the books. There are no standards as to how you determine what's appropriate, et cetera. Put the Secretary's standards in there as well as in the incentive language. Just one thing on, if you say you can have a 4th story, this is assuming you keep the incentives, and say you can have a 4th story if you make a big contribution to the town. Is not this the same thing as selling the 4th story? And you can't use zoning that way. You can't say to a developer, if you want to buy a good development, give us the money, and we'll give you what you want, but you got to pay for it up front. That's not how zoning works, and I think that there could be a legal problem with the idea of these big money contributions for an additional story. In the historic preservation, this is section 5, the historic preservation section, where you say preservation is intended for historic elements. Exactly what an element is, because you differentiate the word element from structures in other places. And I think that you're referring to historic buildings when you say historic elements. And I think that you're going to have a problem down the line if you leave the word element there. And when you say preservation is intended for these elements, what does that mean? What are you saying? Why don't you say preservation is required for these buildings? That's what you should say. In defining what's in a historic property, you use something called macros. And as I understand it, 1 Adams Street is not on the macros list, right?
I don't understand it to be that way. We had, right?
It's not on there.
So, but you have other,
I
you have the
understand that.
National Register,
I don't think it's on any of the
State
other ones
Register.
either. I think it's not covered under the zoning, and I think it should be covered. And I think the Bank of America building should be covered.
I thought it also says, or pending or in good stand, so,
I don't think there's anything pending. I mean, there should be something pending, but I suggested that you should say that any building over 75 years old is covered. And then if the Historical Commission, and I'm sorry the Historical Commission didn't weigh in because I think they should have, that they need a bigger role here. They're the people who understand historic preservation. The people on the planning board know something about it. Many people know something about it, but they're not experts. And I think that the Historical Commission concentrate on this, and they need to be more involved in the process. When someone comes in and says, we've got a historic building, we're going to change it around so that it looks like whatever it's going to look like, the Historical Commission should weigh in as to whether or not they feel the changes are appropriate and historically satisfactory. And having the Secretary of Interior standards would be useful. And saying that the standards apply, as well as the guidelines under the Secretary's standards, which is a 240-page booklet, which should be part of the deal. So expand the list of covered properties so that you pick up the Bank of America and you pick up 1 Adams, 1 Elliott Street, which are in fact the same building.
And would doing the 75 years and older get us those 2 buildings?
Yes. It will get you a lot of buildings. I mean, up on High Street, there are a lot of old buildings which are historic, but they need to be restored. And they're not going to be restored by putting an extra floor on them, that's for sure. I just wonder, shouldn't you treat these small buildings on High Street differently rather than saying if you have a 3,500 square foot lot on High Street, which means you have to combine some of those front to back lots. So you have a narrow lot of 4,000, 4,500 square feet on which you can
I think you would need like 4 lots to get to 35.
No, just 2. You can get a couple.
You sure?
Well, I brought the map and.
Because we had asked about that some time ago.
I don't
but
think,
then
in any event,
okay.
why put 4 historic houses under the chopping block? I mean, High Street is a little street, and it's pretty well used for the amount of street that there is. And saying that we're going to develop this as though it were Newbury Street is.
But you also recognize that multifamily, even 2 families, are not allowed, if they're pre-existing non-conforming is one thing, but even if somebody wanted to have a business use on the first floor, maybe their tax office, and they wanted 2 units up above, they can't do that. So that was the reason for including the High Street, even if the majority of them are individually owned, and the anticipation is if that it would be all torn down would be somebody has to convince their neighbor to sell to them at least 1, 2, or 3 of their neighbors. So that was the thinking behind it.
Well, this is one-size-fits-all zoning, and, what's good on Adams Street is good on High Street. I'm not sure I agree with that. But, for instance, you have this 12-foot-high floor-to-ceiling requirement for High Street. I mean, that's just makes the building taller. No one's going to open a restaurant on High Street. And, saying you need this great big first story on which 50% has to be commercial, when you know that there's no parking and that 50% commercial will probably be empty space, or could well be empty space with, High Street should be allowed to just have condos. And maybe a little bit of, because of the PUD requires that there be some commercial, make a little bit of commercial available, but don't require 50% of the ground floor. It's like the telephone company building, which has about a 16,000 square foot footprint, saying you need 8,000 square feet of commercial space. I mean, what would you use it for? The 50% requirement is, in certain circumstances, definitely too much. And you should revise it.
I'm sorry, what building you just said, did you mention?
Verizon building?
Verizon building.
The telephone company
Right
building.
next to the Swift Hat. It's like the,
That big
That's on
brick
a,
thing.
what street, that's on a different
That's
street.
on
though.
That's on
Adams.
Adams.
Oh, okay,
It's on
that's why.
Adams. Yeah, it's across the
it's
street.
right at the bottom of Canton.
And we do have a
That
requirement,
wouldn't be involved in
we
it.
do have a requirement in the bylaw that if you have a project that has any historic element over 75 years of age, that it has to be submitted to the Milton Historic
Commission.
Commission. We have already got that.
And what are they supposed to do with
They're
it?
supposed to render findings and
They're supposed to
recommendations
render
to
their
us.
findings.
What are they supposed to find and what are they supposed to recommend?
It's their job to figure that out.
It is not their job, it's our job in writing the zoning to tell them what they're supposed to do, because that's how zoning works.
But they're the
If you just say,
experts.
send it to the historical commission, and they'll do whatever they want to, that's not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to send it to the historical commission for them to do something, and apply the secretary's standards. It's not hard to give them some duties here, but haven't done it.
I'm just addressing the fact that we did talk about 75 years of age, of anything that's over 75.
right.
I understand that that was added in response to one of my comments, in
So,
fact.
and I, as when you sat down and I said, thank you for your comments, I think we've considered all your comments to date and working our way through them.
Well-
But, so please, if you have more,
Well,
spill them out for us.
I remember the way you discussed my comment on frontage. You said, oh, who needs frontage? It's not in the underlying zoning, which you have just spent 20 minutes trashing, saying the underlying zoning is the worst zoning that modern man has ever come up with. And then you say, well, frontage isn't in the underlying zoning, so why should it be here? And the reason it should be here is because you measure height from the frontage. And if you don't have any frontage, you have no way of measuring the height. That's why frontage.
So the
is
underlying
important.
zoning doesn't have a way to measure the height. The business
If the
district.
building doesn't have frontage, you can't
Well, the business.
measure it at the frontage.
So our business districts do not have a frontage requirement currently. So we currently have, since 1938, have had that deficit in our business districts, I guess. Because it doesn't have a frontage requirement.
I mean, I could join you in saying the underlying zoning is terrible. In
Yeah.
fact, my first comment is the current business zoning needs revision. And the response was, well, that's not part of the program. We're not going to touch the underlying zoning.
That's not what we said.
We're just going to use it.
Just said it was
to-
beyond the
to
scope.
It wasn't, the scope was defined by MPIC. MPIC, if it had wanted to, could have gone after the underlying zoning. In fact, what is proposed in this zoning could have been in new underlying zoning, but you chose not to do so. And it may not be within the scope, but that's by choice, not because anyone said you can't touch the underlying zoning.
Well, as you know, the underlying zoning applies to more than one neighborhood and district, and it's a lot of study required to look at how Milton Village
You can
and
take it,
Central
you
Ave
can
and
have
Granite Ave
Milton
and East
Village
Milton.
underlying zoning perfectly easily.
Okay, I'm going to try not to interrupt you, and I will ask that you observe the same.
Wait, hurry up and finish. Well, that's what I was trying to do.
Okay.
Okay, Swift Hat Shop, they want to construct a replica, but of course, since they don't want to use the zoning, who cares? But is a replica a historical building? Okay, we have a no.
I don't think so,
Anyone
but I
else?
do think it's a nice feature of that proposal.
I defer to the Historical Commission who supports
That's true,
the
the
replica.
expert, that's right.
You're going to fix the maximum heights. I think that, just to reiterate, one space per 1,000 square feet for a business is crazy. Someone wants to open a convenience store, you say you need one parking space. If, on the Citizens Bank lot, they want a convenience store with, a donut shop attached, and say it's 2,000 square feet. And then you have, say, 2 floors of housing above it. You need 6 spaces. That's not adequate. But you can say, well, people can use the trolley, but I think the trolley is an excuse, which is not really. I mean, look at it. If you have your convenience store at the Citizens Bank kiosk, and someone comes in by trolley wanting to get a cup of coffee, they no longer can use the stairs because they've been closed down, and they will not be repaired because they're not accessible. And so the MTA has no plans to repair those stairs. And so the person wanting a cup of coffee has to go through the MTA parking lot, and then behind the Masonic Building, and then around and up to Adams Street. And the trolley stop is not conveniently located to this area. So I do suggest that one space per 1,000 is, it's hard to describe how inadequate it would be. And when I was in government, this is something we'd say, well, we'd better try a pilot project on this. Well, not just change the zoning then, so every building built from now until whenever the zoning is changed to make a reasonable requirement, has one parking space per 1,000, but, try something out and see if
I'm gonna challenge you on
see
this.
if your one space per 1,000
Alex, we
works.
did pilot it on Central Ave. There's 9 businesses with 0 parking spots.
And
it works.
And
works on there every day.
and the big deal on 131 Elliott Street was providing parking for those businesses.
That was-
And it was
It was a big deal for
31
this board.
31 spaces for those businesses that didn't have parking. And it was You
So
know,
I'm
it
just
was,
gonna say-
the people in that area thought it was really important then. Maybe they've changed their mind, and they should tell Jerry Conley, we don't need those spaces anymore.
I think everybody's going to say we don't need the spaces, let's do away with parking. I'm just saying, I am literally there every single day, multiple times a day, have never once not found a spot. And I think the scale of the commercial buildings there is going to be similar to what we'll see in this village district.
When 131 Elliott is built.
I'm talking about what exists today, with the 0 parking spots for commercial uses.
I
But there
have
is no
some,
commercial use at 131
No, I'm
Elliott
talking
Street.
about
but
the
in the
whole
whole
Central Ave
neighborhood,
business
whole
district.
Central
There's
Ave
9
business.
functioning businesses, robustly
You know, the
frequented.
same is true in Milton Village. Currently, the hardware store, the post office, and the real estate office, and whatever's on the other side, get along. The banks have parking, and the others get along with parking on the street. But you can't expand that forever. At least that's my view. I don't think there's any space for parking under agreement. In other words, it says that use the extra space lot to put your overflow parking in with written agreements. I think the agreement should be, should reflect a deeded space, just so that, you know, they can't be just removed. But there's no place for these spaces under agreement. There's nowhere to put them. I mean, it's, you can say you can have these things, but there's no way to put them anywhere. I thought the design standards were pretty good. I did,
yes, but,
I did think that saying you
but?
had to change your contacts from you know, Gothic to Romanesque every 20 feet is, or was it 40 feet, was a little dubious. And when you said, well, these can always be waived, I understand that they can always be waived, but they should be good to begin with. Oh, and signs. You say, well, signs will be the usual type of signs. Well, provide for it. I mean, if you say the signs are going to be the usual kind of signs, say that. Don't just assume that somehow someone's going to say, well, you don't say anything about signs, therefore,
so we should say that they need to follow the design guidelines, signage
I think you
guidelines?
should say something along those lines.
Okay.
So, that's what I've got for now. I mean, I've got other small things. I had lots of small things, but,
Could I ask you a question?
of course.
You had sent a letter, I think maybe to the rest of the board, months and months ago. It was after the presentation when master plan handed it off to us. And I think Bill maybe went and said the special permit expired for extra space, and you wanted to let us know that it hadn't expired, and I wanted to understand the significance of that
Why it hasn't expired?
and what that means to the
Well,
overlay.
it means that the lot is subject to the special permit under a different zoning provision, which is the same provision that the residences at the wharf were built under. And there is currently a permitted, a big building there,
Yeah.
which would go a long way to,
Modeled in these models.
a
yeah.
long way to
What's approved?
Can you give me the
sprucing
iPad?
up the area
Sorry.
with the restaurant, and I described it.
The mixed use.
Admittedly, the special permit needs to be amended, but if someone on the board, or everyone on the board, cracked the whip and told Extra Space, we want to see some action here.
Right, that's always successful. They're like in the middle of
I'd have
wherever.
never seen the planning board crack the whip. I think that they they should do that.
I
and
don't think
town
I
planner
don't think the
doesn't
owner
get off
cares.
either. They should get out there and get this building underway. It's on the books, the permit has not been revoked. There is a violation of the permit in that the building hasn't been built within 2 years, but that doesn't rescind the permit.
So it hasn't expired, it still exists.
It has not expired.
They can do
The
that.
permit's still there. I mean, it controls the use of the warehouse, it controls the
Right.
2 mills on the river, it controls all the landscaping and the use of the site. I mean, the permit is a pretty big deal, and good permit, too.
So the permit
Does it require
could be
affordable
in
housing?
effect if this
It
overlay
requires a
comes over
contribution
it.
in lieu of.
So this overlay comes over it, so that owner could do, if this overlay were to go through, could take the choice of doing standard business zoning, the special permit, or no, they can only do one thing.
He's only got the special permit zoning because the special permit controls the use of the site.
But they could apply for an amendment to their special permit.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but they can't, they could apply for an amendment to the special, which is what I'm suggesting.
Right.
That they do.
Yeah, and we've, you know, after
What number Adam Street is that?
two,
Two?
the
Need
yeah.
to amend the special permit, because as written, a building cannot be built on that site as originally permitted, because the state building code won't allow it to be built as originally permitted.
So you amend the permit. That's not, you obviously need the owner on board. I mean, it's the same thing with 5 Canton Avenue, talking to the owner and saying, what would you like to do? And the same is with the DeWolf building. What would you like to do? We want to work with you. That's the way to get to something that everyone is satisfied with, rather than trying to tell the owner what they want. And, well, there you have it.
Okay, so one of the things.
Affordable housing. I mean, I could go on all night, but I won't.
Please don't, yeah.
I won't. I'm going to.
Denny has a time limit. so-
We're running.
Actually, Alex supported that.
This is the last comment that I have. On the affordable housing, admittedly, the wharf zoning has no affordable housing. So when I wrote to you a while back, I said, you know, the wharf zoning should be amended so as to provide for affordable
And I
housing. And,
duly noted.
and of course, the board did nothing.
Well, we haven't taken up amending that, because that's a separate article to do.
Oh,
Oh, no.
there has to be one more thing.
Yes.
The final thing is about that great traffic impact mitigation article, which says that if any of the intersections are the LOS, level of service, the LOS shall never be below a C for scenic roads or a D for all other new or existing intersections. And you've got intersections that are less than that. So your traffic impact mitigation zoning presumably would say you can't do any of this development that you're talking about. So you should
Another one to amend.
amend
Unless you
the
mitigate.
traffic impact mitigation zoning.
So-
And
We have talked about that, and that's actually my.
I
it's
thought I
on-
was responsible.
Yeah, both of
I was
us or
going to
whatever.
send it to the traffic commission and get Jeff Mullins' assistance.
all right,
Yeah.
so.
We didn't. That's
But we
not
don't
off
have
the
we
list.
don't have a copy, so we.
Not off the list.
But the most burdensome thing about this traffic impact mitigation zoning is that it requires a ton of studies, which can be no more than a year old. I mean, it's just nutty, the number of studies that this zoning requires.
Okay.
You should.
I'm gonna time you out on that one.
should
We're not doing that
mention-
one tonight.
Mention what's the requirements of TIM in your zoning, so you've got to comply with the traffic impact mitigation bylaw. All right, that's it, thanks.
Thanks, Alex.
All right, thank you, Alex.
Good to see you.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for all your
I love
voluminous
arguing
writings.
with you about zoning. I really do.
We haven't.
All right, so we
Seeing
have.
the special permit.
We have a number of revisions that we've made. I just want to talk a little bit about the process before we talk about any more substantive changes. The select board is meeting Monday morning. They've indicated that if we make a request to reopen the warrant, to receive, to replace the article that we submitted before with this revised article, that they will reopen the warrant and consider that. And they will also consider the addition of 2 companion articles, which you have copies of it. Sorry for the late delivery of these, but town council had misunderstood the timing that we needed. But these have been worked on by town council, and with some of my input today. So the first would establish the Milton Village District Improvement Revolving Fund, and the second would establish the Milton Village Historic Preservation Revolving Fund. The language is similar to the Traffic Mitigation Fund article that was fall of 2018, I think. So if you want to take a moment to read those.
The second page
Yeah, thank you.
is the red line.
The back and forth between,
Kevin gave us a copy this morning.
Okay.
The comments that went back to Kevin are the highlighted and colored. The front cover is the clean version.
Oh, so
of
this,
what will be voted.
so Kevin sent it to Bill, me, and John Flynn, because Kevin was actually out of the office today. I sent a couple of comments, and then I think John Flynn sent some, and they're all included in this version that's on the front.
I have no problem with the first article at all, and this is the standard language. I mean, I've drafted like 20 of these myself for other towns. The second one, I do have a problem with the last sentence. In exchange for the grant or the zero-interest loan, a property owner could be required to convey a conservation easement.
Oh, yeah, what is that?
Why?
No, that obviously,
It's like a cut and paste.
yep.
Historic easement.
that's so funny. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, I think it's like,
What's that?
it's like a
getting
cut
tired
and
'cause
paste.
it's
They
funny.
forgot to strike a sentence from some other town
Yeah.
zoning.
So this was just kind of a placeholder sentence for us to discuss.
The last
because-
sentence?
Yes, because I said to Kevin that I had seen in other bylaws where this kind of incentive, historic incentive, was in place, that that, you know, what would it be used for? I think that he said we should provide guidance for what these funds should be used for in this article. So the guidance is, okay, the town can use them, that's pretty straightforward, but how would you help somebody else in using it? So one of the things is that, let's just say the owner of the Masonic building, their parapet was in terrible disrepair and they couldn't afford to repair it. So they could apply for a grant. Well, why should they just get that grant because they own a historic building? Or should there be some?
Well, they wouldn't give you a conservation easement. That's a term of art,
Yes.
and that applies to open space, not to historic preservation. And you could request, I mean, as an example, when I represent community preservation committees, which we don't obviously have,
Right.
is that when that CPC votes to spend, you know, to give a grant of $50,000 to the, Masonic Hall for something, we get a historic preservation restriction in return. So we do a grant agreement, and the idea is that when you're finished with all this, we get a restriction. Now, under normal circumstances, you would want to get a perpetual restriction. Those have to be approved by the state. They take frickin' forever. So we would just be doing a 30-year, something like that.
Wow.
So you wouldn't be saying, first of all, it wouldn't be a conservation easement. And for a zero-interest loan, there's all kinds of things you could set up instead. I mean, you could have, if a zero-interest loan, they could give you a note, a promissory note, take a mortgage, you'd be behind all the rest of their financing, so it wouldn't be worth a whole lot, but you wouldn't be getting a conservation easement, and you wouldn't be getting an easement, because those are permanent.
Permanent, okay.
So, for something that's short, you're going to give somebody a grant, maybe, as I said, you maybe,
Well,
get
for
some
example,
short
the
term.
Mass Historic Commission and their, I forget the name of the fund that they grant funds to nonprofits, like, for example, the Forbes House Museum has received a number of grants, and with that, they have historic preservation easements or restrictions on...
Restrictions.
Is it restrictions?
It's a restriction.
Okay.
And yeah, but those are approved by the state. So, that's a whole process, there's a whole huge form for that, and the state sits on those for forever.
So I guess the question is, if somebody's applying for a grant or a loan, what's the criteria by which one, do we want to give the Historical Commission some criteria under which we think that they should be doing that? That's the question, really.
Okay, well, first of all, first of all, the major thing is that it wouldn't be a conservation easement because it's not
Right.
conservation purposes.
Understood, yeah.
So you could say in exchange for the grant or zero-interest loan, a property owner could be required to convey a preservation restriction
Okay.
to the town.
And just leave it at that.
Yes. And then leave and to act on anything relating thereto.
So, Bill, do you have that?
I don't, but I get it.
Okay.
Is that written out? Thank you.
Just,
And everything else is fine.
okay, so process-wise, again, we would take a vote to ask the Select Board to reopen the warrant and to replace the article that we submitted with the current article, and to also accept these two companion articles. So that's, then if they vote that way on Monday to do that, then those articles will be part of what they send to the warrant committee.
And then are we going to keep tweaking like after the 13th? Because we're having a public hearing on the 13th.
Well, we don't know, right? Because the public
Yeah.
might come with an idea that we like and we want to
Right.
adjust.
Yeah, so I mean, the way, I think what we had discussed was that we would try and address these major things that we knew we wanted to address, but, and have as much be in the printed warrant, but there's always things that come up with zoning all the way up until the vote, right, on the floor, so I think if there are things that folks want to discuss and consider that we haven't done thus far tonight, given the hour, I don't think we have time for major reconsiderations.
Can we add the sign reference that Alex referenced?
Okay.
I don't know what section of our zoning the sign bylaw.
It's at the end, I think.
Sign was at the end of the bylaw?
I took it out.
Oh, yeah, we took it out.
That's what I mean. Can we add one that
Oh,
just says with reference to our actual sign bylaw section?
Okay, so,
Managed in accordance with section blah, blah, blah.
do,
Of course, mine is
yeah, you're looking
horrifically
for the,
outdated, but you know what I mean?
yeah. I'm just trying to think, where was it before?
Oh,
Was
we
it a-
had, well, let me see, on page, in the design standards, under 6, F or R? R. We had signs shall be integrated with the building design and placed consistently. I don't know what the,
Should we
those are
add,
the signs you're talking about or some other place?
oh, it does say. That's design. I mean, just the process for sign approval, I think is what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So maybe it should be another number.
Well, but also, I mean, you could put here where you're talking about where the signs go. You
Why
could
wouldn't you
say,
just add- why
just
wouldn't
add
you
it
send
there,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
What happens if it's, but what happens if not in it? Wouldn't the
Yeah.
normal town's bylaws for
Yeah.
signs be
Right.
in effect?
Yeah.
It's not that we don't have,
I think that's why we took it out to begin with.
right. It's not that we don't have laws, it's that
Right.
it's not reiterated.
We don't tell them that if they have wetlands,
Doesn't
that
say
they have
that-
to go somewhere else, or
Right.
we don't tell them
If
if
that was
they
the
have
case, we would
other
have,
things.
this would have to be a lot thicker.
What we say about signs is all.
But that is something we should probably have somewhere, I'm not saying now but we should have mixed use signage because it's different than business signage, just standard business signage.
We'd probably need
Do you know
to.
what I mean? If we're going to have mixed use unit, I mean, down the road.
But shouldn't we just be
Part-
referring to where the laws are for the signs and then update that if it needs to be updated?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I mean, like, or in the design review
way you're
guidelines
not
or
everywhere.
the,
I think our design committee just makes those discretionary decisions.
They make a recommendation to
Based on
the select board, or
Yeah. Yeah.
the,
I mean,
Which I prefer, because we used to do signs here, and that was kind of a disaster.
that was awful.
No, I think it should
Was
be a
anybody here
separate.
who did the Dunkin' Donuts decal sign approval
Oh my
for East
God, I
Milton?
can't even imagine.
I drive by every time, I'm like, yep, that looks great.
Yeah.
So I mean, I defer to what everybody else thinks. but-
I'm fine with leaving it alone and just, it's whatever it is with, and we
Whatever
have
our
the right
rules
to
are.
change the design standards when we adopt them. And
But what was the language that you said when you were talking to Alex? You said you were going to,
well, I think it was also to April, what April was suggesting is just refer to
Whatever our.
that.
Yeah.
in
Closes the loop, it's probably not
Yeah, yeah.
necessary.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
good to close the loop.
If you want to find the section, April, I
I
think we
don't
can,
have-
you don't have it either.
I don't know, I
didn't
don't
bring
know
my
where
book.
it is in this.
We did an update, what?
Yeah, I don't have the updated version.
Would be nice, actually, we should have asked Alex how we're doing with that codification of our
Oh,
zoning.
yeah.
It's been years in the making.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I'm just going to run through,
Oh, I can look it up in here.
all right, while you're looking that up, there was a lot of, I'm just going to run through a few things here from Alex. The 3,500 square foot minimum lot size, that was discussed quite a bit. And there was, in meetings, and this idea that there's just so many smaller lots that the opportunity and it's true that the Swift Hat and combined with the property behind it gives you 4,000 square feet. But there are other small lots that, in that 3,500 square feet, we would have to go back and look at each of the lots though. So I don't think we can really, I mean, for me, making a change about something where a lot of analysis was done previously without doing the analysis makes me kind of feel like we wouldn't be doing our due diligence on it. So I'm not comfortable today changing the 3,500 square foot for that reason.
It's been in here since.
It's something that was in there. And, going back and looking at the lots and seeing what that might do and what that right number should be, it would take some effort to do. So I don't feel comfortable doing that tonight. I think 50% of the commercial space, in my analysis, gives us pretty small commercial. And we do want to activate the street and to, High Street has businesses on it. To make it all residential would potentially negatively impact the businesses that are there right now and the people who bought their property knowing that they're in a business district. So I still think it's applying it to High Street for the ground floor commercial was never brought up by anybody in the neighborhood as a concern to them. Always the scale, was and getting that height to 35 feet was really important to people, but not the actual mix of use up there. We definitely should look at if there's a conflict between first floor and ground floor,
Yeah.
but we can't really do that. I think it would be a little hard to do. And then eliminating the incentive, well, that's just pretty significant change too. And that was, again, something where the neighbors felt like we spent so much time talking about it. That would I think would open up a whole new conversation with the neighborhood, because now all of a sudden, they're not getting anything in return for that fourth floor. It's just automatic. And that's not what they spent 2 years talking about.
Do we know, like, that it's legal, though?
What?
Incentive?
Incentive,
Definitely.
yes.
Oh, yeah. What you can't say is like, okay, fine, you're building this affordable housing project and we'd really like to have 8 ladder trucks. You know, that's,
This is tied right to the district, and it has to be tied.
it has to be tied to what the impact. And I think we've discussed this with the public many times and have said, yes, we're going to have this overlay district, but there is a way to address the impacts, and that's by collecting fees that would stay in that district. And I think at this point to say, oh, no, we're not going to, we're just going to pump it up to 4 stories and not have an incentive paid, people would be, marching in the streets.
I just feel like, I mean, had this, think if it was done 30 years ago, and that money had been accumulating and happening, maybe, disrepair wouldn't have happened over in our business districts,
2017 was when we did amended bylaw for the,
So,
I have like the
I got it here.
original 1938 zoning.
Yeah, but
and again, looking at the historic preservation standards,
She has it.
yeah.
I think we could look at that, in trying to, and having that be the historic
Section
preservation
3.6.
standards and guidelines.
Yeah.
Applying it to the guidelines maybe beyond the bonus. We'd have to think about a little bit more how that would work. So, I mean, that was the suggestion that was made by Alex also.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see, he was saying that if you were going to allow a bonus and somebody was going to do that with an extra floor, then they would never be able to comply with the secretary's guidelines, because secretary's guidelines mean that you can't change even a bracket on a doorknob. But actually the secretary's guidelines have morphed over time, and they do allow, handicapped accessibility, other kinds of accommodations for that sort of thing. So in the olden days, he's right, that you couldn't do a thing. It had to be restored exactly the same. And so adding a floor would never be in compliance. But
Yeah,
I
but-
think the more recent guidelines allow for that sort of adaptive reuse.
They do, because otherwise,
All over the place.
If you don't, you might have functionally obsolete buildings that don't
Exactly.
get preserved at all.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in fact, when you go for historic tax credits, the standard are these standards.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you can't add on to the buildings when you get your tax credits.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah.
it all gets reviewed by the National Park Service and
Right.
the Mass Historic Commission.
Yeah.
So,
But I think his point was that nobody would use them because you wouldn't be able to. And I think that's not correct. I think you can.
I mean, one of the primary things that I've found with them
Add this
is that,
sentence to this.
so we worked on a project where had formerly been loading bays, and there were overhead doors in those bays, and it was going to, instead of being a warehouse, it was going to be artists live work studios. And they said, we want the infill to look like overhead doors. So the division of the glass had to be, such that it looked like an overhead door, but it could still be glass. But other things that they'll do is say, if your gutters and downspouts are copper, you can't replace them with aluminum. You have to replace them with copper. So then it has cost implications for people too. If you have a slate roof, you have to repair the slate roof. You can't replace the slate roof with a synthetic something that looks like it. Or
and
if
just
you have
maintain
double hung windows that are 12 over 12 true
Yeah.
divided light, we want your windows to match the brick molding and everything about that divided light. It probably doubles the cost of your windows. So they're not like minor things when you reference these standards for these buildings. And I think I said at our last meeting, like the the one Elliott Webb Mill building has different windows everywhere. But if you found historic photos of the building that showed what the divided lights look like, that would be the standard you go back to, not the standard of what's been replaced over time. So anyway, they're rigorous standards is all I want to make the point.
But they do allow for some modification.
There was another comment about
Signs shall be considered in accordance with
giving the
paragraph
historic
4A.
commission like something to do. I
Oh,
thought
right after
you had
10.
mentioned at a meeting that you can't tell them what to do.
Well, town council advised in the past that we can't make a demand of another body that would then impede the applicant to us to do the work that the applicant has applied for. In other words, if it mandates the historical commission to take an action, we don't have the authority to mandate that the historical commission take an action. We don't have that authority. We can request it of them.
Right.
Which is what we've done.
Which is what we've done.
So
but
do we
can't
request
mandate it
something
of them.
specific, or just what are your thoughts?
We have asked them for their recommendations. So that's the same sort of language that gets used in a comprehensive permit, where you come to the zoning board, and the zoning board then asks the planning board, the conservation commission, everybody to send in their comments. This is the same sort of thing we would be doing here, is that when we had something that had a historic element to it, we'd be sending it off to the historic commission, and we'd be requesting their advisory comments about whether or not, we should include into the special permit. Now, they may choose to answer that or not.
Have they complained, the historic commission, that we're not asking them?
No.
Or not listening to them?
No.
Okay.
We've talked to them a couple of times.
I just wanted to see if it was an issue that wasn't really an issue, or.
No, I think
Yeah,
we should always be asking them to
I don't,
weigh
but
in
my
on
my
anything.
point is, I think we do.
We do,
Yeah, we
yeah,
do, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
But,
and it says in anything over 75 years, you have to,
It's
you know,
prescriptive
you
in
have
here.
to go on the site plan, we have to send a letter to the historic commission and refer the matter to them.
Okay.
Now, if they ever get a district organized, I mean, Alex had a bunch of comments
That's
that
different.
were historic preservation, but there's no point in putting them into our overlay district when that could be done through the normal process of a historic district.
Right.
So we are protecting any building over 75 years old. And that would include the Bank of America and.
Yeah, because that's 19-something, I mean, 75 years is like a lot closer than
But
you
you
used to
don't think,
But
you don't think that we should add
really
that?
What?
I guess you don't think we should add the 75 years to paragraph 5 under historic preservation?
We could.
I think it's worth adding.
Just so you get those two
so-
buildings.
Yeah.
Is there any unintended
Because of
consequences?
that. I thought they were in, frankly.
On High
And we already
Street?
have the
Asked about
demo
it in the
delay.
past.
for
Yeah,
I
that.
had
right.
assumed they were
Okay.
too,
Yeah.
so I'm glad he brought that up.
Yeah.
Not everything is
Yeah,
going
and
to be
that's fine.
demoed.
Yeah.
but-
All right, so
Right.
can
It's
we
just
put,
consistent.
can you work on something right now for that?
Section
Kathleen?
5.
Section 5.
And
Well, I'm
75
sorry,
years
I
old.
meant unintended consequences in the other direction, where we would force somebody to do something where we didn't really care about the building.
Well, I mean, there's all those little houses on High Street.
And do we
All right.
really want them
So
restored back to what
I
they
asked Bill to add,
On signage.
No, it doesn't say, sorry, I take it back, because that's the historic preservation incentive? No, what do we
maybe it
want to
should
put?
say
in?
sign
Um,
approvals.
In section 5,
Shall be
any building
considered.
over 75 years old, we want to fit that in.
Fit that into, it says, historic preservation is intended, if it's included.
Sorry, I was looking at the wrong place, okay.
But while you're looking at that, I just want to point out the word intended.
Yeah.
I mean, I think changing it to required, I can give some example, like from my experience. It's like, you have a building that's altered quite a bit, and the only thing that's left is a few timbers that have been altered and a few foundation stones. And are you going to make someone keep those because that's an element?
Kind of like a Swift hat shop.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, at a certain point, it takes a judgment.
Well, I mean,
Like,
the
is
other
that-
problem is that you could have a situation like my house, which is 1890, and has been owned by a bunch of people who've ripped out half the stuff that was ever in there.
That's my-
And, slapped on a porch in the 1950s and something else in 1962. I mean,
But it's a
seriously.
very
But what you
cool
wouldn't want-
house.
Yeah, but
Well,
I
what you
don't
wouldn't
want
want
to
somebody to
change
do-
that house.
it doesn't.
But what you wouldn't want to happen is if you just bought that last week and then somebody comes around and says, hey, we're changing the rules and now you can't even do anything to that house.
Right.
That wouldn't be fair.
No.
I don't think. And that's what I'm hoping on High Street, we're not inadvertently putting some restriction on somebody that doesn't know that
That's what I'm thinking.
they don't have it now, and that's not kind of fair to them in the future.
So that we said if in that number 5, if you said that
I'd wanna ask
preservation
those
is
people.
intended, if it
My
is
thoughts.
included on any of these lists, if we took all that out and said if it's over 75 years old.
Well,
everything.
those little
That's-
houses he's talking about from the 1700s, so they
No,
are
no,
on
no,
the list.
not all of the ones on
Not
High
everything
Street.
on
Not
High
any,
Street.
yeah.
Not everything on High Street. A lot of it's 70s.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
But-
those
Or
three-
1950,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, which
some of
is
that.
closer to 75 than you think, you
Yeah,
know.
that's true. No.
So
I
all of a
mean-
sudden you're grabbing in stuff that was built after the war, and I don't think we want to be doing that.
You might, anger some people up there.
I mean, one thing about being on these lists, outside of the 2 buildings that we were talking about,
Yeah.
is there's a process to getting on these lists that gets vetted through the Mass Historic Commission, and I still think it's a good thing to have them on there. I think it's important, though, to add the one Elliott and one Adams, so I don't,
Are 1 Elliott and 1 Adams, well, one.
What about
can't believe
on
they're not on
Adams
there.
Street? What about everything 75 and older on Adams?
Or what if, could you, so there's obviously, sorry to interrupt, there's obviously a qualification to be on that list, right? Couldn't we just say will have qualified for the list, even if they're not on it?
eligible. I like that, yeah, I like that.
And then that might cover people that,
Eligible.
they're not on the list yet, I thought I heard Alex said, but there's some that's not on the list that should
That-
be.
Yes,
That's a great change, right
I
there.
like that, yeah.
You only have
I
to
can go home
change
now.
one word. Excellent. Let's adjourn.
What
We're
I
ahead.
think is so funny is you would have done that in 10
you get that?
seconds, but it took us 10 minutes of circling because it's past 9:30.
I know, right?
And
You know
I
what I
just,
mean?
Right here,
Um,
instead of
productivity,
intended.
Oh, yeah, it goes
you just,
down.
Eligible.
just quickly,
Good choice.
So, the
and
thing.
just last, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do think Alex made good points about us looking at revising the Central Ave overlay. The overlay,
Village,
Milton Village.
Milton Village overlay.
I'm sorry, Milton Village.
Not Central Ave, it's working great.
Stay away.
Really?
The Milton Village, to add the affordable housing requirement, the business district, I think that's a bigger thing than just peeling off one. I think if we're going to look at them, we should look at them all.
But I mean, it's kind of the same approach that we're talking about, district-based planning. We're just calling it something different than
Yeah.
the underlying zoning.
Okay.
The premise is the same.
This is probably a bad question, sorry, but
Does that make sense?
back on this first article.
Thank you.
Why does it specifically just say Milton Landing?
Because that's what's in the zoning right now. So if we want to change zoning, if we go back and
Oh,
look
okay.
at it,
I get it.
it's just consistent with the
I get
zoning.
it. Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
And, when
So did you
this,
change that in the future if you wanted to?
yeah, I mean, and I was thinking it was public realm too, not just the landing, but that's what the zoning says right now.
Okay.
And the context for that had to do with how are we going to pay for the improvements that we've been talking about at Milton Landing?
Sure.
And even, so if you had even just water and toilet rooms that are available during the farmer's market, because
Yeah.
anyway, because the toilets in the the old
The yacht club.
yacht club
Yep.
building are, I guess, not accessible, and there's other things. But anyway, just
Makes
that
sense.
kind of stuff. But if there was an amendment that said, district, within the district,
Yeah.
otherwise, I think that would be fine too.
Okay.
But that's why it's the way it is here. I just want to point out one thing quickly on the parking. And I'm going to put together some background, so I think, because this will probably come up over and over, but Boston Transportation Department, they have some guidelines, and they do it by neighborhoods, and Dorchester is included with Alston, Brighton, and Charlestown, East Boston, Jamaica Plain, Mattapan, Roxbury, and South Boston. So they have a lot of things kind of lumped together. But in there, they have, so for office space per 1,000 square feet, if you're within a 10-minute walking distance from an MBTA station, their requirement for that is 0.75 to 1.25 spaces per 1,000 square feet of office space.
Which is what we've got.
Which is what we've got. And then on the residential side, same thing. It's 0.75 to 1.25 if you're within 10-minute walk of the transit station. And I just wanted to do this quickly, if I know we don't want to take a lot of time on this, but here's another one for Bill. This is the Masonic building.
Another one?
Yeah,
All
this
right,
is the Masonic building right here. So 50 to 64 Adams Street. And the business district of 4 spaces per 1,000 means that it's 1 per 250 square feet. And 1 parking space is 290 square feet when you count the drive lane. And that doesn't count for a ramp if you have to do a garage. So if you said that square footage using that requirement would require close to 30,000 square feet of parking, which you would do in a 4-story structure that's much bigger than the building itself in order to provide 4 per 1,000. So we talk about numbers, but look at the visual of that. That's what would be required under our current zoning for the square footage that's in that building. What do they have now? And they seem to be doing okay, is they have 16 spaces. So instead of 103 in a 4-story garage. So our overlay at 1 per 1,000 would be 26 spaces, which is still 10 more than what they have now. Parking is so huge, it drives affordability on the residential because of the cost. It gobbles up our land area. And I was reading, there's places across other parts of the country that are eliminating minimum parking requirements at all, because the market will determine. And in fact, in Idaho as an example, you think, how can Idaho eliminate parking requirements altogether? But they have in this town, a bank was going to expand, and their parking requirements were pretty high, so they were denied because they couldn't fit the parking on their site. So what they did was they bought a few properties next door, tore the buildings down, and paved them over, and said, now we've got enough parking to do our expansion. And so, I mean, that's when you're looking at what's a threat to historic districts, your parking requirements are a threat. And I just think that there's so many things so many reasons why this location, I wouldn't apply this across town because the location is unique. This location, that the parking requirements need to be reduced just like we've done.
Can I just make one note? Today I was in Connecticut with a very well-respected affordable housing developer from Massachusetts, but they work in the greater Northeast region. And they just permitted a project in Amherst, Massachusetts, which doesn't have the train, 1-for-1 parking. And they said it's selling it like a rental, but it's all leased up. They're having no problem, and they're not on transit. They might be on a bus. But we were talking about parking standards and this panel that I was on today about how parking can kill a project because it's just not necessary, and all the zoning requires it because people are afraid.
And the last thing you want is more paving.
I mean, it was just a good example. It's not an urban center in Amherst, Massachusetts. There is no urban center there. That's where I went to college.
Well, and
and it's not even in the town center.
I cited some statistics that I found on the census data from 2018 about even how many vehicles per household, and I was actually kind of surprised at how many households only have one vehicle. But there's a cost to having a vehicle in terms of there's a the annual expense of having a vehicle versus if you can take the trolley. And just one last thing on the accounts. I just want to remind folks that the Baker Chocolate Apartments, which are just across from that 2 Adams Street extra space storage property, they have 0.7 spaces per unit on a rental property, and the property manager told me they have adequate supply for their need.
Since you were with them, I mean, my feeling is, and I think I've changed my feeling over the years, or last couple of years, just I do a lot of traveling around, I work with a lot of younger people, and I see the way things are changing, and I work in kind of that sustainability world. And so the idea is, scaling it down, and people don't want these huge things and all these cars. But my theory for this area too is the great thing about having the train right there. My feeling though is if you build a parking garage, I feel like if you build it, they'll come. And if you build parking garage and you require them, maybe they'll have 3-bedroom apartments, and they'll bring families with children to the schools. Whereas if you're and again, this is just my feeling, if you don't allow all these parking and you're kind of forcing this smaller,
You get a different demographic.
you'd get a different demographic,
Yeah.
right? Is that what they're shooting for in these types of areas?
No, a lot of it
I
is
don't
that
know.
there's no demand for it.
There's just no
There's
demand.
just no demand. It's not that they're saying, because that would be violating fair housing.
No, I know
To
that.
say that, I'm going to
Well, if you
design
build
this
an
so.
800 square foot
Yeah.
apartment over in Ben's, you're
No.
not thinking of
But a lot-
three-person families coming in.
Yeah, but a lot of that is, there's just no demand for it.
No, I understood.
So what we found in the 40Bs that I was doing is that we couldn't find people to buy, to rent a 3-bedroom unit because house prices were mortgage rates were so low that people would say, well, why would I want to rent when I can
So
buy
you're saying you
something?
don't have to deter them, they're just not buying it anyway?
They're just not, yeah.
I'm working on a really big redevelopment project in the city, and the neighborhood's been asking us to do something more family-friendly, to do more 3 bedrooms, and the company that I'm working with doesn't want to do it because they can't rent them. And when they do rent them, it's to 3 individual
Right.
people.
Yeah.
It's not a family.
Okay.
So they're sort of like, it's
Yeah.
not achieving the goal.
And did they see the data that just came out about the number of children plummeting in the
Oh,
city?
man, yeah.
Crazy.
I
I think that's why the neighborhood wants
They
a more
want it,
family-friendly development.
So
but
when
it's-
we say we need more apartments around the table and we need more housing, you're not saying it's for large families, you're saying it's for more single.
I think it's for everybody.
And seriously, it's for me.
No, I get that, but
No.
I guess I'm trying to follow
Yeah.
up with what you're saying is
Yeah.
there's just no demand for it.
Yeah,
So
and
there
because
must-
the thing is that the problem we had in the market over the years was that because interest rates were so low, it made sense if you're going to pay $1,800 a month for something, you would say, well, I'll pay $1,800 a month towards a mortgage on a house I can own,
Right.
not a 3-bedroom apartment that I will rent.
Right.
That's just not a good, economic choice.
And my feedback to that comment is I think that there is demand for multiple bedroom units in Milton, 3-bedroom units for
Sure.
sure.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is the
This
spot
is where
for
you wouldn't
them.
go that, yeah.
I think
Right.
that's more of like a
Well, I don't think
two-family.
there's the space for it.
Yeah.
Again, I think if
Yeah.
you build parking structures, you're going to get more traffic in this area, you're going to get more people in this area,
Well, you're going to get commuters parking.
Commuter
you're going to
parking.
get commuters parking.
Well, here's my concern. If you look at the numbers, the study or whatever came up with 100 and whatever spots, but it's at 66% generally, leaves like 35 spots. You revitalize a couple of things, those 35 spots are gone. Now, where does that overflow go? So it's just going to keep going out
Are you
Well-
talking about for business use?
for any use. I mean,
So I think, what I keep coming back to, and I really do love debating Alex on something. And so that was kind of fun. But it's like the Central Ave Business District. The types of businesses that we're going to see on Adams Street are going to be what we see in
Right.
Central Ave. It's going to be a little coffee shop. It's going to be a barber shop. It's going to be like
A dentist, yeah.
amenities for the neighborhood. So it's not like
Right.
a huge movie theater that's going to have people parking for multiple hours at a time. It's going to be kind of in and out. You know what I mean? So I feel like 35 spots could be perfectly adequate. I should probably go down there and count how many there are today without 131 Elliott.
Well, we have it.
Parking really does work.
But here's
I
the
mean,
other.
no, I mean on Central Ave.
The other unintended consequence, though, is like what you said before. If you require it, okay, so there isn't the space for it, so that means they're going to have to rip something down and put some pavement in. And I don't think anybody would want to see that happen.
Well, if
And I
you
think
look
what we're
at,
trying to generate is
I
like
don't. You want to have some lively. Look at how interesting that funeral home space is. Like a bazillion parking spaces.
I think of
and a
East
building.
Milton. I've heard people say, "Why don't they rip a couple houses down and throw some parking
Yeah.
there?" No, why would you want that? You're
Well,
gonna be
what
out-
you want is people walking to like little
Yeah.
what happened in the 50s, right?
service-oriented.
Yeah.
You've got the building setback with the parking in
Yeah.
front and a lot of asphalt.
They
And
may get that.
And that's kind of what the zoning requires, and this still doesn't have the amount. So, and, even.
But that's on High Street, that's a medical office building?
Yeah.
I was there the other day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So instead, I'd rather see it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've done it well, but I'd rather see you restrict the use so that you don't have
Exactly.
other issues.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's
I just
ground
like
floor.
sometimes
Yeah.
I gotta look
Okay,
at things over and
so-
over. All right, so I'll take a motion
I would take a
too.
motion.
Several
Just-
things.
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
yes.
'cause
No,
you
go
said
ahead.
50% of the floor area. I was wondering,
Oh, we're not
did
doing
you
that.
think about Alex's point on High Street of
Mine,
not
yeah,
having
no.
50% business of
Nor
the
do I.
floor area, just on High Street, because you don't have.
My
it's more
concern
than-
about that was the fact that there are a lot of commercial uses on High Street, and now all of a sudden, it's like, there's,
It's not that they can't do it, but to require them to.
but the thing that happens is, like, I've seen this in our work, is that in areas that are in transition, now you have residential neighbors who complain about a business use next to them.
All right.
And, now you're getting the noise from the delivery truck on your first floor unit, whereas if you've got a business there and you're up above it, we don't want to discourage or any way harm the businesses that are already there. So that's the thought.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing about Alex's comment while Melinda's here? I don't know anything about the stairs to the train station, but maybe that's something we can ask Mike Denneke
yeah.
to take a look at and call the MBTA about.
May I?
Yes,
Yeah,
you may.
Thank you. And I'm coming here as a select board member. So, Reps Cullinane and Driscoll sent a letter asking that it be fixed. We backed it up with another letter from the select board.
Right.
And they came back with, well, we're redoing the station, so no.
Oh,
They're redoing the station.
when?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that whole line,
right.
yeah, so, again, I don't remember when things are going to happen, and I don't have that, but I can certainly send you.
So they'll fix
Not
them,
tomorrow, you might know, you don't remember.
they'll fix them when the station's redone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean.
But they
there-
haven't
we-
started
we
yet,
may-
right?
Right, and the thing is, we don't know what the redesign's gonna look like, so I can't say that those particular stairs will be there, but it will be hopefully more accessible.
Better
Yeah, you
connection.
think.
They're changing the train.
Right.
We're going to be getting the green line that's out in E is going to wind up coming here. They're getting new trains, so we're getting those.
Right. So we're getting new trains, and they're gonna redesign.
We're going to get the green line coming there.
We're gonna get,
We're
Well,
just
that's
getting
what,
better
actually,
trains.
that's where those came
We're
from.
getting the
Oh,
old.
I don't
Ones
take
that
it,
are
so I
there-
don't know.
I
anything
do.
about it.
Newer than
yeah.
our
And I took them when they were on the Boston College line. They're the same,
No, I think that sounds
trolleys.
great.
So they were,
There's
the
nostalgia for
trolleys
those
that
trains.
run
I
there
just took it
now.
last
Yes.
night.
ran
I was
on the
like, is
Boston
this
College
better or
line.
worse
Right,
for
and
us?
that's
never.
That's part of it, yeah, that
You can
there's-
go right
never
to the
taken the trolley
cemetery.
either.
It's beautiful. Oh, I take it a
And I
couple
live
times a week.
three
I
doors.
tried
down.
once, there was no parking.
I take them all the time. Go to Butler.
I
But
did, I did. I literally tried.
Park in my house,
and it
Rich,
didn't work.
anytime.
And I
tried.
actually attended
I actually
something
find
at
it
the
to be
Transit
Like 9:30
Commission
though, so.
that talked about, they have parts of it calendared.
In some design stage.
But not all of it, yeah, but,
But that's
Yeah.
good news.
yes, but it could be 10 years.
But that's not fair though. I mean, because if they're
No,
going to say no and
Yeah,
take forever, that's not right.
But I think-
We should push hard.
it's something like 10 years. It's in the,
Yeah, they're
it's
saying
in the
it's
tip.
so expensive.
Right,
But-
it's in the tip for federal funding because they're going to redo the line. They have to widen out the tracks. So when they do that, they'll do all of them.
Right. But
I
it
feel
doesn't
like
help
if we
right
pass
now.
the
How do people do
zoning
it now?
and get a development and then go back and say, can you give
Well,
us
they're
some sort of
doing a
temporary
TOD
relief?
out at Mattapan.
That's one
So what are they
reason
doing
I think
Yeah.
that if that happens, I really think that gives us
Better
another.
argument,
Right.
yeah.
So how do people get down there now?
They
Go
just
around the
walk
back.
around.
Have to walk all the way around, so if
Or you cross the
it's not
bridge
that-
and go on the other
it's
you
side.
have,
Okay.
if you're differently abled
to
in any
Central.
way, or you have issues
I go
with
to
energy
Central.
and things like that, I mean, it prohibits people from actually taking the train, not having
It's
those
unfortunate they
stairs.
can't put
From
them.
that station, though.
From that
Because you can
station,
go
right.
to
You could go
Central
to
and
Central or,
You can
New
go to
ramps.
Butler.
right.
Easy
Well,
for them to
the
forget about
ramps.
it for 10 years and
It's, but I mean, it's
They
like,
did ramps in, they just didn't do those stairs.
like the MBTA is not talking to
Okay.
the administration because
Yeah,
of
3
the
minutes.
TOD anyway. Denny has one, thank you.
Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you.
Denny has one more
So
thing for us to
for
consider before we vote.
Number 10, off-site parking. We had talked about this at a prior meeting, and I think Kathleen had suggested lease instead of agreement, and instead of deed.
I definitely said no on a deed, because nobody's going to be able to get that.
Where is that?
In 10,
10,
on
in the
page
middle.
7, we said off-site spaces may be used to fulfill shall be associated with a parking agreement.
Yeah, so what about a parking lease?
Well, An agreement could be,
Could be a lease.
could be a license.
Could
It
be, yeah, it could be a handshake, though. I mean, like.
No, no.
That's what I
Written,
mean.
should
The
we say
parking
written?
agreement shall be submitted to, with the site plan
Right.
requirements. So we know we are requiring a written
Yeah.
agreement.
But I think what he was trying to say is like,
He wants deeded parking, and
Right.
that's just not.
So that it can never be
abs-
changed.
right,
abs-
but that's why lease was better than agreement, but not as long-term commitment as deed. But a lease was like a longer-term commitment.
It doesn't, no, a lease could be for a year.
Yeah.
You know,
Should we
What's
say,
I guess the real
so what
issue
we could
is
say though
somebody
is,
faking it or just
Oh,
do it.
yeah, they say we can park here and.
So what's the, what, I guess, so from, I don't understand the terms that you just said, so
Yeah.
from, if I said to you, what is the stick in there that says, somebody can't just walk in and says, oh yeah, I got an agreement with this guy down the
You
street.
put it
says I
in,
can do it.
you put it into the
Decided by
site
the owner
plan.
and the project proponent.
Bill?
Huh? Okay.
The,
See, Mike.
Mr.
Yeah, that's why I just
Yeah.
wanted them to say it.
So we
can-
decide-
Chan's parking is behind Santander Bank.
Right.
The issue is the manager of Santander Bank wrote a letter, gave it to Mr. Chan. Mr. Chan brought it in, brought it to us. We looked at it for site plan approval and said, okay, they have an agreement. The manager was gone in 2 weeks. Now,
Yeah, but this
that
is
was
the
the
owner,
manager.
not the manager, the owner of
Owner of the
property.
property.
Yeah, but, so you see the point though, that's what's happening
Well, see,
now.
but that's what you have to do when you issue your permit.
I'm just
is that-
asking so you can
I'm just
explain it
saying-
for people listening, and that way they'll feel good.
So I'm
Yeah.
saying is that, well, I want to have flexibility in this.
Yeah,
But if somebody comes in and says, oh, well, I'm getting my parking from extra space storage on
Right.
special permit land that I'm never going to develop.
Right.
Because the security guard said so.
Then the people here,
Yep.
this board, are going to say, we want a parking agreement.
yep, from
Submitted.
the owner.
And we could make it as a condition, which we've done, the ZBA does in their permits, is that if you don't have this, this parking agreement, we find out it's not in place, you lost
Is
your
that
permit.
what Novara has right now? So what did they do? Because they went to the ZBA and said, we got an agreement with a couple places.
Navarra has it with Falcone.
Yeah.
On site,
No,
right?
they
Yeah.
needed more parking, and they said in front of the ZBA, we have
they
agreements
have,
with
like,
across the street and down the
with
street.
the church
With the
and-
funeral home. I was in the meeting.
But
I heard them say it.
but that's up to the board.
Yeah.
Not,
To
you
say
know,
that's
to
not good
say
enough.
that's not good enough.
No, that's why I was asking, is that what they have? So it sounds like maybe the ZBA said, well, we're not
The
going to
ZBA
put it
didn't
in.
care.
We didn't care.
So perhaps they didn't care, or they
Okay.
were just like, oh, fine, whatever.
Okay.
You didn't care.
It wasn't on
You were,
mine.
she definitely wasn't on it.
I wasn't sitting on
I
it.
vividly remember who was there.
Not on that one, but we did
Yeah.
talk about that for the Milton Club.
Right.
What were they
Oh,
gonna do for parking? And that's being monitored, it's part of the special permit. If there's a violation of that permit comes up for renewal.
No,
and
I
3
so
years,
I'm,
you
I feel good
follow
about
up.
this. I want to just explain though, I'm not talking out of both sides of my
No.
mouth, because a little while ago I said less parking.
Yeah.
However, it depends on use. When you have 5 restaurants in a row, that requires parking. And that's why, I like this then, because it sounds like if this other issue comes up again, maybe there's
More
My
buttoned up.
problem with it
a little bit
is-
better buttoned up, because it wasn't.
Yeah, and
I
as I
can
said, I
say-
think that, the idea, deeded parking is a problem.
Mm.
Because nobody will give it to you, because if you go out of business, you've got a deed for parking on my property, and you're not even operating anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be doing that.
No, I
So-
I agree with you.
So just an example, and maybe Bill can help fill in the details on this. But I mentioned that the restaurant at 88 Wharf 88 Wharf had their special permit amended a number of times for parking. And one of the times was they were required to lease the 20 spaces from the MBTA. And so then they came back and amended their special permit and said, we'd like that rescinded. We don't want to have to lease
Modified.
that.
Yeah.
Modified, sorry. We don't want to, we don't need that. Our restaurant doesn't need it. We want you to modify the special permit to remove that requirement. And they did it. So,
So I like all that. So I've been to towns or little
Yeah.
town centers, and you'll see a little sign that says, parking is across the street.
Yeah.
Problem, though, in Milton is if you drive in certain areas, you don't know that it's across and around the
And
corner.
there's none of those quaint little signs either, by the
There's
way.
none of those signs.
There you go.
It's like a shell game. I feel like the restaurant, and I don't know which one it was, but the idea was, well, there's some parking at the funeral place around the corner and down the street, and then there's some at the church way down the street. But like if you don't live there, you don't know that, and there's no sign. It's like a shell game.
But we're
so you
talking
end up
about-
parking in a neighborhood.
But you're saying it's covered because we will have the ability to
That's
require that.
That's our job.
Right.
That's our
Okay.
job, is that you're coming in here with this process, and that's our job to say, okay, I'll be crossing the Atlantic on a sailboat, so I don't even know. But, but that's our job.
Yep, no, I agree. I just wanted to talk it through.
Yeah.
So,
But deeded parking, nobody's ever gonna get.
I don't care what you call it. I
Yeah.
just wanted to know that there's something
Yeah.
actionable that we can work
Yeah,
on.
I think you're right. I mean,
Opposed to
saying.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, there's.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to make a motion before we turn into pumpkins.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we submit the article as
Can I
the,
just ask you first to request that the select board reopen the warrant?
that was my motion.
Oh, okay, I thought the language was your motion.
No.
Okay, sorry.
No, my motion is to move to request the select board to reopen the warrant to consider to consider our revised overlay district language and to also consider putting 2 articles on the creation of the District Improvement Fund and the Historic Preservation Fund,
So the ones we have before us as amended tonight.
as amended.
All right.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank
But
you.
adjourning.
Oh, sorry.
I'd like to make a motion to
Second.
adjourn.
Aye.
Because Denny's already got her.
Aye.